certain number because of the Union
Okay,
list,
we're
and
going
he just
live right now.
core that much. Yeah, I got it.
All right,
Okay.
everybody, welcome back to another Sunday show. Tonight, we're looking at Confederate Corps commanders from the American Civil War. There are some big names on our list tonight, and some less famous names as well. Joining me as always, is Sean Chick, a Civil War expert. And I guess before we get into this list too much, there are a couple of individuals who I've been asked about here through Discord. The two individuals in question are John B. Gordon and Patrick Cleburne. They didn't make the list. Sean, would you like to share why that is the case?
In the case of Cleburne, he only commanded a corps in one battle, Battle of Jonesboro, essentially, and he would command a corps off and on occasionally, but he never held it for an extended or permanent. It was never a permanent position. It was never for an extended period of time. So it's rather hard to gauge him. There was some belief, though, that when he was given corps responsibilities, that it was a little above his abilities, or that he was a bit overwhelmed by it, which might have been why he wasn't promoted to corps as the war went on. Because some people think that the reason that he was never given a corps command in the Army of Tennessee is because of his support for freeing slaves from military service. I'm not saying that's impossible, but what evidence we have does not indicate that that is why they did it.
Oh.
Some of it also do with seniority as well. Cleburne was a brigade commander at Shiloh. So was A.P. Stewart, but A.P. Stewart had Bragg's favor and other people's favor, and also A.P. Stewart had West Point education. Cheatham got a corps command, but Cheatham had been in command of a division almost from the beginning of the war, and he had been very important in raising and training Tennessee troops. That's something to keep in mind, too. Cleburne lacked a West Point education, but he also lacked strong political support system. His main political ally was Thomas C. Hindman of Arkansas. But other than that, he really didn't have any political clout. He simply was very good at his job. He impressed Hardee and the other commanders, and that's how he got the position that he had. I think there also might have been something. This is my supposition. I think there might have been a feeling that Cleburne's division in the Army of Tennessee was so good because of him, and the division might become inefficient without him. And to be honest, the only battle that they fought without him was Nashville, and Cleburne's division didn't do very well. In fact, December 16th, as they were moving into position, they broke down and fled. Now, to be fair, it's a very impossible battle, very difficult battle, but there probably was some truth to the idea that the division owed a lot of its excellence to him.
Didn't they get chewed up pretty bad at Franklin? And that's also is that where Cleburne died?
Yes, that is where he died, correct.
Was his unit maimed at the battle, or was it just mostly him going down?
No, his division was ripped to pieces pretty much. The Texas Brigade fought pretty well on the first day at Nashville, but they were barely engaged on December 16th and they ran. And not that I blame them. I mean, it's a very difficult battle.
Yeah,
but
outnumbered,
I'm not
what,
agreeing.
4-1 or something?
Yeah. Also, there's a lot of growing pains to Corps Command, as you will see when we're talking about these guys. So what I'm saying about Cleburne is that he very well might have been a very good Corps Commander, and he definitely deserved it. But one should not say emphatically he would have been great. It may have been above his abilities.
Okay, I never knew that.
Yeah, I mean, he was very good, but there was a belief amongst Hardee and some of the other officers that he didn't have mental flexibility.
Do you remember that guy at the Perryville battlefield, the tour guide who had like that homemade Patrick Cleburne sweatshirt?
No, but that's pretty
You
crazy.
were there.
Yeah, but I don't remember that one.
Yeah, so it was the guy from Illinois. You talked to him for a little while. He was, an older gentleman. He came and he was showing off the battlefield, and he had on a Patrick Cleburne shirt, and then he was talking about how great Cleburne's division was. And it had to be something that he custom made, because there's not really a big market for, Confederate division commanders. and
I
their
will say this:
images.
if anybody's getting a T-shirt as a division commander, it's Cleburne. I mean, he probably of any division commander in the Civil War is the one who's the closest to having like a cult around him.
Yeah, that's probably true. I can't
You
think
know,
of
so
any
I'm
more
not.
famous division commander, North or South.
Uh, AP Hill
Well,
is
yeah, but
pretty
AP Hill
hot.
became a corps commander, so.
True, but I mean, AP Hill would kind of be the only other one I could see where that would happen.
And he also fought in all the best known battles, pretty much, so.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, no. So Cleburne wasn't here because he only commanded a corps in one battle. It wasn't his permanent position. How good he would have been is debated. By the way, when I say rigid thinking about Cleburne, I don't mean that he was like mentally incompetent or something. But if Liddell is to be believed, and Liddell, who was a brigade commander under Cleburne, was a very perceptive man, he said that Cleburne was very meticulous, and the secret to his success was his ability to keep his men well disciplined and keep their morale up. Which means that's a perfect attributes for a brigade and a division commander. And also, he was very astute. For instance, at Shiloh, he didn't do very well in the opening hours of the battle. He spent post Shiloh studying what went wrong, trying to make sure it would never happen again. And also, what I found is Claiborne actually did very well later on the first day of Shiloh, like on April 6th. Though
Oh.
he definitely had enough mental flexibility to learn. So I don't know. But by the time he would have made Corps Command, there wasn't much he could have done either, right? I mean, Sherman's knocking on Atlanta at that point.
I've also noticed, though, that people tend to think of others as being more or less intelligent based on the degree that they happen to agree with what they say. So if Cleburne was sort of thinking outside the box, then it may be that case because he's not getting the points they're making, they think that maybe he's not all that smart.
Hmm. And then, of course, there's the whole controversy with his proposal to free and arm the slaves. You know about that one?
Yeah, the famous meeting where I think was there only one copy that survived? Somebody was telling me earlier.
That's possible. I know that Jefferson Davis had it squashed. Uh, the proposal was supported by quite a few officers, Hardee and Cheatham being the two heaviest hitters. It was condemned by J. Patton Anderson, himself a planter, and the one who really condemned it was W.H.T. Walker, who was called Old Shot Pouch because how many times he'd been wounded.
Damn.
Walker is one of those like hard fighting but uncreative types, you know.
Would Bragg have described him as being rigid in his thinking?
I would describe Bragg as rigid in his thinking, at least tactically, you know.
Yeah.
But whether then Johnston, of course, didn't approve of it either, and then it was, of course, squashed. But the discussions had already been made. There were other people who were already bringing it up at the same time. Eventually, within a few months, Leo would bring it up. Beauregard will be bringing it up. You know, the only thing I found with a lot of the Confederate officers who backed freeing slaves from military service, the things I found that they always have in common is either one, they didn't own slaves themselves, or they were not really into the whole plantation system to begin with. In other words, that wasn't as important to them as Southern independence, and that would be Lee and Beauregard for sure. At the other end, you just have ones who are creative. So Liddell supported it as well. And Liddell himself is a big slave owner in Louisiana, but he's also very intelligent, flexibly minded. And if you're reading his memoirs, you can see as the war goes on, he's more interested in independence than maintaining slavery. You know,
Right.
but that is really that as the war goes on, that becomes even more of a thing that's in tension within the Confederate command, within the Confederacy itself. Like,
Right.
what do you favor more, independence or this social system we're trying to keep up? You know. So anyway, the other one we asked about was Gordon, right?
Right.
Yeah, Gordon really almost made this list. And I kind of think maybe he should have at this point because the way I was working this list was I was trying to keep it at a set number, and I cut him because he only commands a corps in the last few weeks of the war, essentially. Now, in those last few weeks, he leaves quite an impression, leads the attack at Fort Stedman, will end up leading the last attack of the Army of Northern Virginia, which comes at Appomattox Courthouse. So, yeah, maybe I should have included him on here. Uh, that said, he wasn't in Corps Command terribly long either. Everybody else on this list was in Corps Command much longer than him, with the possible exception of Magruder. But everybody else in this list was in Corps Command far longer than Gordon. So Gordon is still a little hard to rate. Also, Gordon, by the time Gordon makes Corps Command, I mean, the fucking war's over. Okay? I mean, it's done.
True.
It's kind of hard to gauge how good he is given that. I would favor him. I would say, though, that he probably did very well overall. Hell, one guy could have put on here was like, we didn't do any Cavalry Corps commanders, by the way. This is all infantry. But one guy we almost could have put on here by the same token was Pickett. He was essentially commanding a corps at Five Forks when he got smashed to pieces.
Well.
So, it did not go super well, but always remember, man, that's some fried fish for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, at least he got some fish, so that's really all that matters.
Oh, they baked him, man. I'm saying they're frying it. I guess I'm hungry for fried fish. I don't know. Well, anyway, do we have any other questions right now?
Well, there was one other person who asked about William Mahone, but of course he was only a division commander. And
yeah,
we do have a super chat I guess we can knock out before we get into the list proper. It comes to us from Speedy Sphincter for $10. Thank you, Speedy. Mm-hmm. And he says, question for Sean. Any good books about German Navy / U-boats in World War II other than Iron Coffins? I'm currently reading Sink 'em All, and I love it. I'm trying to learn more about the history of naval warfare and tactics.
Okay, Iron Coffins being the controversial U-boat memoir. A lot of people don't like it too much. It is the bare minimum a good read, though. Let me look at my bookshelf real quick. There's one I've got on this list that's very good. This one's from the Naval Institute Press. The German Fleet at War. I don't think this is a U-boat one, though. I think this is entirely like surface actions. Yes, this is mostly surface actions and raids, but I found this to be an excellent book with lots of maps and a good deal of information, including like detailed discussions of the battles between German and British destroyers in the English Channel, which almost nobody ever talks about for understandable reasons. Yeah. So, on the case of the U-boats, that's a good one. Well, I'm sorry, not the U-boats, so the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine. Sorry, guys. I don't have a devoted U-boat book here. I just have what they discuss in some of the more general histories. And, I read... I got a lot of my U-boat information from... you ever saw those Time Life books? They had like a black... They had like a black cover with silver lettering on.
The ones that I have of those are more of the silver whitish, but it's the same series. I think just different editions.
Yeah, it's like a history of the Third Reich thing, you know?
That's a great series.
It's kind of like... It's got lots of maps, a great amount of images, good amount of information, pretty well written. It does kind of veer into Varibu territory, right? But I remember the book they had in the U-boats being quite good as well. And of course, I played way too much Aces of the Deep and Silent Hunter 3.
Yeah, another series, I can't think of the name of it, but there was a series published in the 60s or 70s. They're small paperbacks that deal with different aspects of World War II. My dad has a bunch in his office.
Those are good books. I've got some of those.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of those, but if you can find them, those are definitely worth a read.
Yeah, for your dad's age group, those books were just like those books were common, like on the playground, you know.
Yeah, I think that's where he got his, maybe when he was a teenager or when he was in the early part of his Army career, because he built up a little military history library, and now he just uses it at work. He's a JRTC teacher, although I don't think he ever really assigns any of the books, but...
Oh, come on, you should, man.
Well, I mean, yeah, the problem is a lot of our high school kids, they don't really have the longest attention span, and if you start adding on a bunch of reading, it makes it even harder to recruit kids.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'll say this. I want to say, so the one for naval stuff, typically your Osprey books for World War II at sea are good, especially ones dealing with the Pacific War, because almost all of them are written by a guy named Mark Stelle, and he is fantastic. In fact, I think there's an Osprey book where they collect all of his writings on the Imperial Japanese Navy, and I would consider it the best one-volume book if you just want to like have it, just to have about ships and whatnot. So anything written by him is excellent stuff. So I've read a lot of those too. Because some Osprey series are their stuff in the Civil War isn't that great, really. The Revolutionary War stuff's really hit and miss. But I find their World War II at sea. I find World War II at sea and Ancients are their two most consistently good. Their most consistently good stuff is those two.
Yeah, I like their Ancient series. I read some of the first stuff I ever read about Alexander and Julius Caesar came from that series. So I read the Caesar Civil War, and I read the one they had on Alexander's conquest, and that gave me a very good general knowledge that I was able to expand upon later. So I'm really glad I started at that point. It was a great place to begin.
Also, their ancient stuff, because we don't have as much concrete information, they're more willing to like play around with creative ideas or theories. That's where their Kanai book straight up argues it makes that argument that Paulus is really the guy in command. It's all a cover up.
Yeah, that and so Mark. I think it's Mark Healy, right?
I think.
Yeah. Also, I'm pretty sure the one on Alexander might have been written by Heckel or one of the other fairly big names in the field. So for those, they also got some heavy hitters, at least for some of them.
Oh, their Napoleonic stuff is good, but that's because the Osprey series was originally done by Chandler, who wrote the campaigns of Napoleon.
Which is also a really good book.
Yeah, even if it does have a little too much Bonaparte worship at times, but it is a good book.
Yeah, it's extremely detailed. I read about half of it as a teenager, and hopefully my dad hasn't thrown away the book. I'm trying to get it back so I can finish it. I think I left off right as the Winter War was getting underway.
We've got one more super chat. I want to get that one in, and then we can dive into the Corps commanders.
Sounds good.
Oh, wait, real quick before you do, what you drinking tonight?
I have brandy and water.
Okay. I have Jamie Stewart blended Scotch whiskey.
Nice. I don't remember what brand the brandy was, but it was a VSOP style, and it was the second or third cheapest one. I've tried the Coronet before. That's the bottom of the barrel. This one's maybe one step up from that, and I can definitely tell the difference.
Yeah, this whiskey here was a half off at Total Wine, and it is quite good.
Yeah, and also actually for almost every show this year, the thing I was going to was Evan Williams bourbon, which is pretty low rent, but it was good enough. Yeah. It wasn't bad enough I'd complain about it, but I probably wouldn't buy it again. That being said, if it was on sale or something, maybe. The next one I'm trying is Jim Beam's 8-star, which I haven't opened yet. Or it's just Beam's 8-star or whatever.
All right, let's go ahead and get to our Confederate. Oh, no, let's get to our Diogenes has a $20 question. Thank you very much. Hey, what you all been reading lately? Also, what do you think of the idea that slavery would have naturally went away without the war? I feel it was too important to Southern social structure for planters to easily let it go. What you been reading?
So I just finished this past week. I finished reading Thomas Frank's *The Wrecking Crew*, which is sort of about the impact of conservative governing ideology. Right now, I'm in the middle of actually an Osprey book on the Wars of Independence in Spanish America. And I'm not sure what I'll be starting next, but my reading time's been a bit limited because I'm trying to finish a chapter right now. So mostly when I am reading, it's stuff directly for my dissertation, so it's not really sitting down to read a book in the traditional sense. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. How about you?
The two books I'm actively reading right now. I've got a few where I'm reading chapters here and there, but the two I'm actively reading is Confederate Strategy from Shiloh to Vicksburg by Archer Jones. So far, it's pretty good. It mostly has to deal with what the Confederates do post Shiloh up to Vicksburg, of course, and a lot of the stories about how does Joseph E. Johnston react to that because he becomes a theater commander. Book I'm really liking right now, though, is Dark Horse by Ackerman, which is all about the 1880 election. So it starts off with Garfield getting nominated. So there's nothing in there about the Democratic nomination process. I'm on the election part. And then, of course, it's going to deal with the very brief Garfield presidency and then his assassination. And I'm doing this research for the show a week from today. We talk about the assassinations, which, by the way, will also be my birthday. We'll be doing that on my birthday.
Yeah, we'll be doing assassinations on Sean's birthday.
So. Yeah, because we'll be doing it past midnight, so straight to those odds in March. So if you're doing Caesar, hold off until after midnight, okay?
Okay, it shouldn't be a problem because I got plenty to say about Philip. Well, oops, I shouldn't have said that. Whatever.
Yeah, really looking forward to that one because I don't know a ton about the assassination of Philip II. I know a lot more about Caesar. Okay, the book I just finished is Retreat to Victory by Robert Tanner, which is about Confederate strategy. And his argument is the Confederates could not have done a Fabian strategy. They could not retreat to victory given social, political, diplomatic, and economic pressures. We might do a whole thing on that someday where we talk about the way strategy worked in the Civil War. But I found this to be maybe the best book on strategy I've read about the war, because his arguments are very well made, very hard to refute, and he uses Clausewitz, which always works for me.
All right. What about the slavery part of the question? The idea of it going away without the war?
No easy question here, huh, Diogenes? So this is a very difficult one. I would say the popular consensus is that slavery would have kept on and on to the point where you have like that movie where the Confederates win. It's like a fake documentary, and they have slavery into the 20th century. And the Nazis make an alliance with them and all that sort of stuff. But beyond all of that, if I'm going to make a case for slavery going away, case would be that the price of cotton and sugar collapsed within 30 years of the war being over. Now, the argument for is that they were already starting to, that there was already the use of slaves in factories, and that would have been the next step. However, while slavery was profitable, there is a lot of historical evidence to suggest it would not have been particularly efficient with factories. Now, maybe the Confederates in the South would have put up with that. Okay? I'm going to say it's a counterfactual, and I'm going to actually go with I don't know. I slightly favor that slavery would have ended, because not only the economic pressures, but also the diplomatic pressures from the rest of the world. That over time it would have been considered so odious they would have to end. Now, that does not mean that it ending the way it would have been fine, because the other problem you have to deal with is that scientific racism really gets popular post-1860s. I mean, it's already gaining traction before that, of course. So it's a very difficult question. It's a counterfactual. And being a counterfactual, I think anybody who gives an answer 100% one way or the other always sounds a bit silly to me. Although I'm going to favor slavery was probably going to go away without the war.
I'm inclined to agree with that, actually. I think that it would have gone away at some point. Precisely when is very hard to say. And another factor to consider is that possibly, as if America kept its stuff together overall, kept going, kept growing, then perhaps the influence of a slave nation could have turned the tide back to some extent, or at least slowed down the pressure, or made the world just kind of accept that America was an outlier. I don't know. I don't know how long it could have gone forward. I think really what really made it happen, the Civil War, was that the South became super paranoid about losing their slaves. So if they had just kept their shit together, I don't think the North would have pressed the issue for some time.
Maybe, maybe not. That's all the can of worms there too. The thing is that they can see their political and economic power waning. That's a big part of it. there's also the fear of slave insurrections. That's why John Brown is so important to the Civil War starting when it starts. You know, um, and I mean, it's understandable. What had happened in Haiti. I mean, the Haitian Revolution was extremely bloody, and then you have the Nat Turner Rebellion, and I mean, slave insurrections and plots in general make Southerners, white Southerners paranoid for obvious reasons. But the Nat Turner Rebellion, I mean, Nat Turner is a religious fanatic who murders women and children. That is tailor made to make people become hardcore, right? And it also happened right when Virginia was debating whether or not to end slavery, whether they would have or wouldn't have. I want to read about more to see how possible that was. But it was being debated, and then Nat Turner happened, and there are a number of people I've read who have said that was decisive. After that, there was no way slavery was going to end in Virginia, and that if Virginia had done that, it would have been kind of like an experiment, like see how this works, right?
Yeah.
Which, well, let's be fair, people. Most ideas that we think of as progressive legislation in America usually start on the state level before they hit national.
Right.
And if I can give one bit of praise, because everybody loves shitting on the South, they'll say the Southern states did business and railroad regulation before the Northern states did, for the most part. So I'll give credit to the former Confederate states for that. Okay.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, one of the big leaders in that was Postmaster Reagan, or Reagan. I can't remember how you pronounce his name. I think it's Reagan. He was really, really effective. Probably Jefferson Davis' second or third best cabinet minister. But anyway, you want to get that'd be that'd be an arcane tier list. Let's go rank cabinet positions in the Union and the Confederacy, right?
Damn, yeah, it would be.
There's a few of. I mean, I know the big players like Bates, Chase, Benjamin, Seddon, but man, you can really get in the weeds with some of those people, like the guy who's the Secretary of the Interior under Lincoln. That's getting to the weeds. But anyway, let me see. You want to do we got another super chat. You want to do that one real quick?
Yeah, let's knock this one out, then jump into the list. So Oscar Palacios asks for $20. Hey, I have 2 questions. First, what helps you concentrate to read? I find it difficult to read for long periods of time. The second question is, could you do a video on the Mexican Civil War during the time of Pancho Villa? So, for my part, when I'm reading, one thing I like to do is try to find a comfortable spot to read in. I prefer to read by natural light if possible, so I like to read during the daytime. And, just find a nice, comfortable spot, maybe somewhere you don't always sit, somewhere without a lot of obvious distractions, and just try to really get into it. I had one friend in college who looked a little older than he was, and he went to a professor's office to ask about basically this question, but in regard to some, rather arcane Soviet documents. And the professor, who was from the USSR, said, I tell you what, here's what you do. You go, you pay homage to your woman, you go, have a few glasses, vodka, beer, whatever you prefer, sit down, it will make much more sense.
Was he right?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if having a few makes, like, say, Zizek easier to read. But, I think in general, yeah, also taking breaks once in a while does help. Taking notes on difficult parts helps to sort of map things out a bit. It really just depends on what you're reading in terms of how you approach it, and also what you're reading for. Are you reading just to have a general familiarity? Are you reading for comprehension? Are you reading to gain enough information to write an essay? Exactly what is the purpose of the reading? You kind of have to know what your mission is when you're going into it, unless you're just reading recreationally, in which case the main thing is just, blocking off the time and having the sort of setting that helps you to concentrate.
It can be fine. It can be hard to find that setting. Um, I think the natural light, that's actually a very pleasant way to read things, I find, especially fiction.
Yes.
Um, One thing I do say is that maybe it's just me, it's easier for me. If I'm into the book, like a fiction book, I'm going to get through it, right? If I'm not liking it, then I'm just like, if I'm having problems concentrating, then whatever, not for me, forget about it, right? Um, when it comes to nonfiction, if I'm not liking the book as much, but I know there's information there, I will skim. And, just years of skimming, like skimming for school, you do get some skill with that. And you can pick up vital information, right? But of course, if you're really into it, then sure, savor every page.
Yeah.
But
It
one
really
thing I
just
would say is
depends.
that I had this weird notion that if I start a book, I must finish it. Fuck that. Your life is finite. There are
Yeah.
thousands of books, man.
And
So if
Oscar
you're not
was
liking a
saying
book,
he's reading for
chuck it
fun. So
aside, read something else. All
yeah.
right.
So exactly. If
Yeah.
you don't have to read something and you're not digging it, then just read something that you will get more out of.
Yeah.
Unless it's
And
something you are convinced is vital for your personal development for whatever reason. In that case, I guess soldier through. But if it's just something you were kind of curious about, then you start reading it and it sucks. This would be the experience I had with the Jeffrey Wirt biography of Longstreet. I'm
it's
glad I
so
quit.
bad. That's so boring.
Yeah, the writing is just it's unbearable. And the thing is, if you're in a college setting and you tell the professor the writing is bad, that's not considered a professional reason to not like something. But if you're reading on your own for your own pleasure and the writing makes you want to vomit, don't do it. Why the fuck would you? Also, it is still a good idea to point out to your professor if the writing of something is bad. That way, they might assign something different in the future. Because I know that would be my reaction. Aside from some annoyance that people aren't going to be very good in the discussion, but also, noted, I'm going to have to change up what I assign next time I teach this class. So, I actually do point that out to your professors. So, as for the Pancho Villa era, maybe, especially as we, do some stuff with World War One at some point this year. Sort of a side theater in some ways. So perhaps I don't have any immediate plan on that though. So I
I
guess
I
we'll
know
see.
I know next to nothing about it. I mean, Mexican history is one of my big blind spots overall.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I do have a friend who's an expert in Mexican history in the 20s and 30s, so I could ask her about this, and I'm sure she would have at least a few good places to start. But that will be a little while before I get around to anything like that. Although it's not a bad idea. So,
I hate
anyways,
saying it, but the only figure in Mexican history I have a decent grasp of is Santa Anna.
yeah.
And
So, I guess
that's
that's
purely
it.
because of a series of military campaigns.
Yeah. So, you ready to dig into this list of Confederates?
Yeah, sure.
So
Our
we can either go through them as they're listed. I just put them in kind of a random order I thought might be interesting, or if you prefer to do a different order, I mean, you know who these
Yeah,
guys
I'll
are.
just do the
So,
order I've got them here. So the first one is Richard S. Ewell.
yep, Dick Yule.
Dick Ewell, yeah. Richard S. Ewell was noted for being very eccentric. He was said to have the mannerisms of a bird. He would also like put himself in odd positions to relax. Known for being very profane until he got married. Intelligent officer. Anyway, it was Ewell had done exceptionally well under Jackson in the Valley and at Second Manassas, where he got wounded. And Lee, post Chancellorsville, is kind of looking for a replacement for Jackson. He's dividing the army. The army's going to go from two very large corps to three. Ewell will command most of Jackson's former men. Not all of them, but most of them. And he's looking for somebody who he also thinks can kind of fill Jackson's role. So Ewell's stepping into some pretty damn big shoes. At any rate, he does very well in the opening of the Gettysburg campaign. He wins the Battle of Second Winchester, smashes a Union force. At Gettysburg, there's been controversy about whether or not he should have attacked Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. I don't want to dive too much into that one, It would appear that Lee gave vague orders. At the same time, Ewell could possibly have been a bit more aggressive, but it seems more that was unfair blame. That said, Ewell's handling of the attacks on July 2nd and also his combat on the 3rd was not very good. Anyway, he doesn't do that well under Lee the rest of 1863, but he remains in Corps Command. At the Wilderness, his men take some losses, but overall they not only hold up, but Gordon himself manages to launch a flank attack that shatters Grant and Meade's right flank. But Ewell will end up being replaced after Spotsylvania with Jubal Early, and then was sent off the Richmond defenses. It would appear that Corps Command was beyond Ewell's abilities, and most likely both getting married and the wound just took something out of him. And so Ewell's a classic example of somebody who, as a division commander, was considered fantastic and was elevated to corps and proved to be erratic at best. Do you have any opinions on him?
Not too many. I mean, I know that apparently my impression is that Lee thought that Ewell didn't really have the nerve to commit to attacks after he became a corps commander, and that he was disappointed especially in Ewell's handling of his corps at Gettysburg.
Yes, understandably. And I mean, the most famous controversy has to do with July 1st, but if you really look at it, his handling on the other 2 days is nothing special. In fact, there's a lot of problems with it. So, Ewell's a hard one to rate, of course, but because he does well at 2nd Winchester, and he does pretty decently at Wilderness overall, but very erratic. I would go with a D. I mean, one could ask for better. One could get worse, but he's not good. That's for sure.
Fair enough. I mean, I've never read anything about him as a corps commander that makes me think that even choosing him was a great decision. Although I guess based on the chain of command seniority and proven performance, I can understand why he was the next man up.
Well, the other ones they were debating, Hood was one of the guys who was up, and Richard Anderson, and I'm trying to remember who were the other ones. Of course, A.P. Hill ended up getting the nod. Oh, McLaws, they discussed McLaws. And, I mean, there's nothing in those men that would tell me that they would have been, like, fantastic corps commanders at that point. Well, Anderson will get to a little later, but you see what I'm trying to say here.
Right.
The ability to handle a corps effectively for both the Union and the Confederacy is very difficult. There's a variety of these men who have decent reputations today who I would say are very poor as a corps commander. The more I read about James McPherson, the less impressed I am with the man. He was obviously very brave and intelligent, but nothing they did as a corps commander was particularly special, and in many cases he was rather sloppy. So it's difficult, you know?
Yeah.
So no, it's a very hard thing. These men weren't trained for that, and I mean, we have to keep in mind too that they're commanding armies they were never trained to lead. I mean, none of these men at West Point thought, I'm going to be leading 20,000 or 100,000 men into battle, ever. The armies of the Civil War dwarf everything before that.
Yeah. Well, our next...
Yeah, they got a hell of a learning curve.
Yeah, for sure. Our next individual is another guy who came into Corps Command after Stonewall Jackson's death, Ambrose Powell Hill.
Yes, A.P. Hill, Powell Hill, the one who he would go up. He had his red shirt on. The men knew that he was ready for a fight. A.P. Hill, of course, had moments where he'd become very ill and then he would be out. There's been a lot of debate over what that is. The current theory is that A.P. Hill got a venereal disease while at West Point, possibly syphilis, and that this meant that his health would go in and out. I'm not saying that was the case. I'm just saying that's the current theory that's being bandied about. So A.P. Hill, very, very fiery man, much like his red hair, I guess you'd say. Infamous for his arguments and disputes with both Longstreet and Jackson. At any rate, Hill was elevated to command of 3rd Corps. Partially it's because of how good a division commander that he is. Also, the core of the Third Corps that Lee forms after Chancellorsville is A.P. Hill's old division. They take A.P. Hill's division, which had 6 brigades, and they divide it up. 4 brigades into one division, which would be led by Pender, and then 2 brigades into a new division led by Heath, who also now has 2 brigades that have been transferred over to him. So, brand new division. Anyway, it was understandable that you couldn't take Hill, make his division smaller, and then not give him a corps, right? So he's got to get a corps command. And to be fair, I mean, Hill has done fantastic for Lee, particularly Antietam and Chancellorsville. So it's understandable. He's earned it. How does he do as a corps commander? Extremely erratic, maybe even more so than Ewell. He doesn't really handle Gettysburg all that well. He's kind of out of it. His men get mauled at Bristow Station. Famously, Lee actually got upset with Hill. You know, Lee's temper rarely broke, but when it did, of course, he could be, you know, his anger was intense when it was raised, if you will. I think what he said at Bristow Station was, "Let us speak no more about it and bury these men." At any rate, Hill didn't do very well at the Wilderness either. His flank was rolled up. Longstreet had to come in there and save it. So at this point, you might be thinking, man, A.P. Hill's a dud, right? After the Wilderness, he does a lot better. He shows notable improvements. Now, to be fair, some of that is the fact that Mahone becomes a division commander and does really well at this time. And so Hill does have experienced division commanders, but Hill's corps in the Gettys and the Petersburg campaign essentially acts as Lee's mobile reserve. And there will be a number of battles that Hill does very well in, such as, you know, Second Reams Station being one of the most famous ones. So Hill shows a lot of improvement, and for that reason, I'd really like to read a study, like a biography of Hill, but one that gets into like how he developed as a corps commander, because at first he's doing very poorly, and then he shows notable improvement. And I'm wondering how much of that was him learning, or was it just like, oh, he suddenly got good subordinate commanders? But I come with the impression that he learned his trade, and that by the summer of 1864, Lee is using Hill as the mobile reserve for a reason.
Wasn't A.P. Hill pretty young at this time? I think he was still under 40.
Yeah, something like that. He famously died when the Petersburg lines were stormed, so he's one of the last Confederate generals to die in the war.
Yeah, do you think that part of his
do
you think part of his increased performance was just that they were mostly on the defensive, so they had the advantage?
He was attacking a lot of those battles, though.
Oh, really?
Like Second Reams. Oh, yeah. He's attacking. He routs the entire Union Second Corps. Now, keeping in mind, the Union Second Corps is really used up. Like, one of the mistakes Grant and Meade made was they relied so much on Second Corps that by the summer of 1863, the Second Corps had actually sustained total casualties that were in excess of how many men they started the Wilderness Campaign with. Think about that. That's insane.
That is.
And so you were talking about a lot of raw soldiers. I think by the time they reach Petersburg, over half the brigade and division commanders have been killed or wounded. And those who haven't been, a bunch of them get killed and wounded at Petersburg in the June 15th to 18th assaults.
So Second Corps was still Hancock at this time?
Yes, but Hancock, after Reams Station, he's really lost it. Plus, he's having a lot of health problems. He's gaining weight. His Gettysburg wound would get aggravated. So, especially from Cold Harbor on, Hancock's abilities are really on the decline. It's a lot of it has to do with health.
So he went from being Hancock the Superb to Hancock the whatever.
Well, you see those pictures of him after the war. I mean, he gets ginormous.
Yeah, I have.
He becomes a very large man. So anyway, I would give Hill a C.
Okay.
He had a very rocky start, so that has to be kept in mind.
And who is our next gentleman? Is that Buckner, or am I wrong?
No, that is John Bankhead Magruder.
Ah, yes, Prince John.
Yes, yes, Prince John, known for his theatricality. And he looks like Robert Shaw, the actor, the one who played the shark Quint, the shark hunter in Jaws.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, he kind of looks like him, man.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
That's one of the greatest roles in film history is Quint. So Magruder commanded essentially a kind of like a small corps, I guess a large division maybe, on the peninsula where he ably held McClellan back. He falls back. He now finds himself as a corps commander under Joseph E. Johnston and Seven Pines. His men are not committed to battle, though. He did the demonstrations north of the Chickahominy River during Seven Pines. Where Magruder will be more actively engaged is in Robert E. Lee's 7 Days campaign. Now, Magruder himself is a little bit interesting. He was an excellent artillery commander in the antebellum army, arguably maybe the best battery commander they had. Jackson served under him and thought very highly of him as an artillery commander. And fun fact, Magruder is one of the only generals, one of the only Confederate generals who did briefly serve with the Union.
Really?
Because before Virginia secedes, Magruder is posted at Washington, D.C., his artillery battery. So when Lincoln is plotting the defense of Virginia, Magruder is there for some of the early discussions. And Magruder was kind of into it. He's like, hey, if Virginia secedes, I'm out. Till then, I'm an officer of the United States Army. I will discharge my duty loyally and faithfully. Virginia secedes, he tenders his resignation, and then he leaves. So yeah, Magruder for the first week of the war or so has like 1 or 2 meetings with Lincoln. Fun fact. Then anyway,
Do you think if he would have stayed in the Union Army that he would have gotten a decent command, or what do you think would have happened?
I think he probably would have gotten a decent command. He had a very good pre-war career, and there's an argument to be made that Magruder was either a man who was elevated too quickly, or Lee just didn't like him. He didn't like the theatricality. Magruder, to be fair, underperformed in 7 days, most famously the Battle of Savage Station. And that when it was over, Lee said, I don't want Magruder here, so they shipped him off to Texas. A fun fact about that, Magruder is going to command the troops in Texas for almost the entire rest of the war. Does very well, seizes Galveston, his men hold the Sabine Pass. He's able to organize units there and forward them to Louisiana at some key moments. So Magruder actually did quite well in a backwater. But as a corps commander, he's a bit hard to gauge, actually. He's only really involved in the battles outside Richmond. He wasn't as heavily engaged as the rest, but he didn't show as much. He definitely didn't show any great amount of ability. So it's kind of weird. If we were talking about, if we had a random list, like Confederate district commanders, you want to be a real nerd about it, Magruder would actually rate very highly. But as a corps commander, he did well in the peninsula. He didn't do so well in the 7 days. I guess I go the D. He showed some pretty sloppy staff work. But I guess they all are at that point. But anyway, I go the D.
So I guess his specialty in the war was commanding districts and also working with the shoestring budget against long odds.
Yeah, essentially.
Which is a pretty good skill to have. I mean, I guess they did put him to good use, but still.
Oh, yeah, I would say Magruder's Confederate career, while it wasn't quite as great as he would have thought it would have been, or he didn't do as much as he would have liked to have done, it was a career of mostly success. So it's not a bad one.
Fair enough. All right. Next up, I don't remember this gentleman's name, but I know you do.
Yeah, A.P. Stewart. Alexander Stewart.
Interesting side note, as a kid, my dad was stationed to a fort named after him in Georgia, and that's where my 2 younger sisters were born.
Okay. I wonder what they'll rename that. Is it still around?
The what? Yeah, it's still around. They actually just upgraded it in the earlier mid-2000s. They used to have the World War II buildings in the 90s. I went to work with my dad a couple times, and none of the buildings had air conditioning. I mean, it was just a total shithole, and now the whole thing's been redone in brick. It's basically new. All the housing even is nice. Um, it looks great now. You wouldn't know what it used to look like.
Excellent.
And they have the School
So,
of the Americas there, where they train a lot of Latin American officers. It's a huge
oh,
building. It's basically a war college.
okay, interesting. Do you know what nationalities you usually saw there?
Usually, what?
What nationalities did you see there when you were there? Or
I mean, I'd never went inside of the School of the Americas. My dad worked in logistics, and the
gotcha.
building. I mean, I was like in third grade or something at this time, so I wasn't paying very much attention. I think I got into some sort of a fight with somebody else's kid. We were throwing rocks at each other. That's about all I remember, and it was hot as
Wait,
shit.
didn't you tell me like there was like the Navy kids were all about the F-14 and the Army kids are all about the F-15?
Well, this would be the Air Force kids.
Oh, sorry, Air Force kids were the F-15. I'm sorry. No, Army kids are into the A-10 Warthog.
Maybe either out of the Apache helicopter. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I remember we did live on an Air Force base. Actually, the assignment after that in Alaska, where they had F-15 stations. So a lot of the kids I went to school with, were their dads were F-15 pilots. So they had a very definite opinion about which aircraft was the best.
Well, it's always the F-15 because that's Starscream. Just saying, okay?
Yeah, although the F-14 was piloted by Tom Cruise.
It was. Unfortunately, the F-14 is no longer in service, but the F-15 still is.
That's true, although only the ground attack variant, the F-15E Strike Eagle.
Whatever, man. I'm still shocked it's still around. I'm shocked it's still around. The damn thing's been around since Ford was president.
Actually, longer than that, since Nixon. I think it was fielded in 1972, 3 or 4. So it was either very late Nixon or very early Ford.
Yeah, I wondered, did it see any action in Nam?
No.
That'd be
No, actually, yeah, it was a little too late for noms. It might have been 74 now I think about it. I'm not going to look this up. Somebody else can
Yeah,
look it up.
it's notable the kind of equipment that still gets used, though. I mean, the Browning automatic rifle saw use in Nam in the first few years. You know, they're still rocking the BAR.
Yeah.
But anyway, AP Stewart essentially fought with the Army of Tennessee from its birth to its death, practically. Called Old Straight. Not a very creative commander. He drilled his men hard and well, but he didn't really do any kind of innovations in tactics. That's for sure. That said, he did exceptionally well at Shiloh, and did pretty well at Stones River. Quickly became one of the favorites of Braxton Bragg. Did very well at Chickamauga as well. And Stewart, by the time we get into 1864, is being tapped as a corps commander, which he becomes after Leonidas Polk dies. Stewart's tenure in corps command is a bit, for lack of a better term, shaky, if you will. He's the one who launches attacks at Peachtree Creek, where he gets mauled. Also, Ezra Church. When John Bell Hood becomes commander of the Army of Tennessee, Stewart essentially acts as his advisor. Like Stewart's the one who's mostly going to be involved in some of the plans that Hood makes. That said, Stewart's men get severely mauled at Franklin, and then at Nashville as well. Oh, one fun fact about Stewart, though. Hood wrote a letter to Stewart before the war was over where he essentially said, if you had been at Spring Hill, we would have Tennessee. That's that battle where the Union forces managed to skirt past Cheatham's corps. So you can tell who Hood blames for that one.
Yeah, I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, Stewart did not show. I mean, Stewart's in a very tough spot by the time he makes corps command, but nothing he did showed that he had some kind of amazing abilities as a corps commander. He's an uncreative man. I kind of feel like it might have been a bit beyond his abilities. That he had the skill for corps on the level of discipline, organization, administration, which a guy like Magruder, for instance, wasn't very good at, for sure. But at the same time, I mean, for instance, at Franklin, Stewart's corps, I mean, gets chewed right the hell up. I mean, it's a very difficult battle, of course, but there's some poor coordination there, too. God, at Nashville, Stewart's corps held the left flank on the first day, and they get just chewed up and they practically fall apart. And Stewart himself can barely rally the men. And then you get he holds the center on the second day, and the men just, I mean, by that time when the left flank folds, there's not much Stewart can do beyond that. So I don't know. I kind of hate doing this with him because he's such a good brigade and division commander, but I actually give him an E.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
And
sound like
you know,
he was very good at Corps Command. Which...
he never really did anything. I mean, I'll be fair to him; it's a very difficult spot, but he never did anything that was that impressive, really. You know, it just they would talk about Cleburne not being creative or being rigid, but I find a lot more creativity with Cleburne than I do with Stewart. But once again, to emphasize, Stewart had done very well in brigade and division command. So once again, you do very well at that, get elevated to corps, you don't do so hot. Happens all the time.
All right. How about the next gentleman, Thomas Jackson, better known as Stonewall? I think his biggest mistake, of course, was missing out on the nickname Action Jackson, but that's just me.
Man, this dude's a nobody. All right, like who the I know, but
yeah, he doesn't have a cult following or anything like that.
No, he doesn't have a cult following even today. I mean, God, what a weirdo. So here we got Stonewall Jackson, everybody's favorite crazy eccentric, straight out the Old Testament. As a corps commander, and I'm not going to rate him as much on. Well, I guess I can rate him. I know I'll rate him on the Shenandoah Valley because he's commanding 2 divisions. And my opinion of Jackson, and I made this analysis a few years back. Other people have been picking up on it too. In independent command, when Jackson was left on his own, he was very good. We're talking the Shenandoah Valley, the opening moves at Second Manassas, when Lee tells him, I want you to go attack Hooker's flank, and he marches around. Excellent. When he's under the direct supervision of Lee, not so great. I mean, he didn't do so well at the 7 days. Now, some of that was exhaustion. His men were exhausted. They had done punishing marches. Jackson himself had exerted himself to the full in the campaign, but it's also one where he's under more direct supervision by Lee, if you will. And one could Antietam. He does not do that well at Antietam or Fredericksburg, I would say. So I find Jackson to be one of the ultimate hit and miss commanders. But that said, when this guy hits, damn does he hit. So I got to go with a B.
And I guess there's that famous... Well, I think it actually comes from Longstreet's memoirs where he points out, he said, okay, everybody talks about how great Jackson was and how I sucked. Well, riddle me this. Why was I commander of First Corps and second in command overall?
Well, I think Lee understood that Jackson. I mean, you know how Jackson, like, he didn't consult with his officers. Ewell famously said that when one of Jackson's messengers came up, he said, I sometimes suspected I would be given orders to invade Antarctica or the North Pole or something, right?
Yeah.
So, Jackson was so secretive, and to his men, he was not particularly accessible. Now, they eventually liked him because he won battles, and he became a martyr when he died. I find the similar thing with Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant was not beloved by his soldiers, but if you're able to win battles, men will respect you, and they'll put up with whatever your deficiencies are. And Jackson's got quite a few of them. He'll do punishing marches. He's got the charisma of a mule. He keeps the plans to himself. A lot of subordinates did not like working under him. They thought it was difficult. Jackson, though, did have a very solid grasp of maneuver warfare. That's what I would say above all else. As a straight-up just battlefield tactician, Jackson was solid but nothing great. But in terms of understanding operational maneuver warfare, he's one of the best that either side has. And that's really one of his great gifts. Also, he had a very good staff, too. So, Longstreet's like, riddle me this. And I'm like... I think Lee understood that Longstreet had a less difficult personality, was better at organization, and just a more well-rounded commander. Right?
Yeah.
But, being fair to Jackson, he's good. I mean, I'm giving him a B for a reason. He did some excellent stuff.
Yep. All
Riddle
right.
me this,
Well,
bat. That is fucking funny.
and
Riddle me
he
this, bat.
sucked on lemons a lot. I mean, those were not those. That was my paraphrase, not an exact quote.
No. Longstreet had been a time machine. He had seen like Adam West Batman. He was like, I dig it. I dig it. He really liked Frank Gorshin's Riddler. You know, at the spandex with all the question marks.
Yeah. Oh God.
By the way, did you know like what? Not Frank Gorshin. One of the other guys who played the Riddler was Sean Astin's father.
No,
You
I didn't
know,
know that.
yeah, Samwise Gamgee himself.
Damn. Huh. Well,
God, that actor's so annoying.
the next gentleman, I think it's safe to say, was marginally less successful than Stonewall Jackson. Leonidas K. Polk, known as the Bishop.
Yes. Polk owes his position in large part to the his friendship with Davis. It also helps that he is very prominent in Louisiana and Tennessee and has a lot of connections. So he was going to be giving that and his West Point education. He was getting a bare minimum. He was getting a brigade command and when this war started, and also due to his charisma. What did Liddell say about Polk? He said Polk had every attribute of a great commander except for tactical ability. Now that's one hell of an insult, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, think about it. He's charismatic. The men love him. He's able to win people to his side. He's got like a great soldierly bearing. Unfortunately, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Anyway,
So it'd be kind of like
Polk
if somebody said that a person was taken out of central casting, but they're a dumbass.
yeah. So Polk is he's in command when the Confederate troops enter Kentucky. The degree to which that is his fault, because they'll say, "Oh, Polk entered Kentucky," and then things started. I've started to come around to the idea that Kentucky was going Union anyway, and that Polk's interest in Kentucky really didn't actually matter as much as they say it does. Fun fact, by the way, Grant was about to do the exact same thing. Like Polk only beat him by a day, so it could have been Grant violating Kentucky neutrality first.
That's
Well, at
interesting.
any rate, yeah. At any rate, Polk did okay at Belmont. Shiloh, very mixed performance. Shiloh is one of his better. I'm like, okay, so in Shiloh, his corps got broken up. He lost a bit of control as the battle went on. He did play an important role, though, in sealing off the Hornets' nest. He actually did pretty well there, I would say. So the only problem is that he was blamed for the traffic jam that delayed the attack at Shiloh, which is probably the main reason the Confederates lost. Because if they attack a day or two early, I don't think Grant wins that battle. But anyway, Polk leads a corps at Kentucky invasion, Stones River, and then Chickamauga. Particularly Chickamauga, he does really poorly there. And then he gets sent off. Now, Polk's finest moment as a commander is when he's transferring troops to Johnston, and he comes personally and he takes almost everybody with him. And therefore, he's able to save the Army of Tennessee from what might have been certain destruction. And I would honestly say the Atlanta campaign, Polk was doing quite a bit better. And his charisma was keeping the army together because he was on good, friendly relations with Hardee, Johnston, and Hood. Once he dies, you really start to see the high command of the Army of Tennessee break down yet again. That said, it isn't like after Resaca there was much chance for Polk to really shine, but he seems to have done better overall. I don't know. He's pretty bad, I would say, for the most part. His high moments are probably Resaca and arguably Shiloh, but he's bad at Perryville. He's even worse at Stones River, and he's abysmal at Chickamauga. I almost want to give him an F, but his battlefield charisma, and he did have a few moments, so I'll go with an E.
I remember one time you told me that one of his greatest talents was explaining why someone else was at fault rather than him.
Yeah, he was pretty good at that.
So I guess the battlefield charisma extended to the after action reports.
Yes, it did. He puts some pretty poisonous ones out there too. Um, he he feuded with Beauregard and he really feuded with Bragg. So he undermined both of them, but he liked Johnston a lot. So once he was under Johnston, you also see that he just performed better in general. You know, so yeah, but I'll stick with the E.
Fair enough. Next up is S.D. Lee, who actually, of all the people on this list, is the most normal looking. I would say you see somebody who looks like this no matter where you go.
I would say so too, man.
It'd be very
I
easy to
really,
cast this man in a movie.
yeah, God, I didn't think about that, but you're right. Except maybe Polk. I've seen guys like Polk around, but yeah, Polk and S.D. Lee are probably the only guys. So Stephen Dill Lee, I had a professor who called him the Forrest Gump of the Civil War.
Oh no.
Well, he just shows up like all the time. He's also one of the only Confederates who will command infantry, artillery, and cavalry, with varying degrees of success with each one of those. But yeah, think about it. He delivers the surrender demands to Fort Sumter in 1861. He was in Beauregard's staff at that time. He will later on find himself commanding artillery, and he does that with Lee at Second Manassas and Antietam. Does very well. Gets shipped off to Vicksburg. Commands a brigade exceptionally well there. Finds himself in department command. Leads cavalry. Doesn't do quite so well, and then gets transferred over to Corps command in the Army of Tennessee. So they don't promote Cleburne. They promote Stephen D. Lee. Or Cheatham. They don't promote either one. They promote Stephen D. Lee. As a Corps commander, his first outing is a disaster. He is the guy who precipitates the Battle of Ezra Church, which is just Confederates getting slaughtered. I mean, it's a really it's like if you're one of these guys who loves like reading about Union soldiers massacring Confederates, go read about Ezra Church. It's your battle. You have a hard on the entire time, I promise you. But anyway, so he doesn't do very well there. He does get better as it goes on, and I would say he's one of the only commanders whose reputation is enhanced by Hood's Tennessee campaign. Now he does pretty well at Columbia, where he has the artillery and he pins down Schofield for a period of time. At the Battle of Nashville, especially on the second day, his right flank holds. They inflict heavy casualties on the Union. His men a lot of them do flee, but enough of them stick around to prevent the Union from having a successful pursuit on December 16. Probably his high point as a commander, though, is December 17. He's in charge of the rear guard. Union cavalry is pressing them hard. They essentially fight a running battle from the Brentwood Hills south of Franklin. So miles and miles of combat. Lee gets wounded and stays right there at the men. Doesn't relinquish command until the day is over. It's one of the best rear guard performances of the Civil War. So Lee is somebody who started off very rocky and showed, I would say, considerable improvement. And he's energetic, intelligent, flexibly minded, more so than A.P. Stewart, which is kind of weird. I always say that Lee has this erratic career because there are battles where Lee does very poorly, like Ezra Church and Tupelo are like real bonehead stuff. But when he's good, he's good. So I'll go with a C.
All right. Even better than A.P. Stewart, who's only one tier rank above F. All right, next up.
I feel bad about it because Stewart he wasn't that good at Corps command because he's too rigid. When you're in Corps command, you have to have a degree of flexibility that a guy like Stewart just doesn't have.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain amount of broad-mindedness to comprehend your task, because your task often involves thinking on scale and making decisions that affect more than just a small body of men.
Yeah. And
Is
to
this
be, I
man
mean,
Buckner, or am I wrong?
no, this is Simon Bolivar Buckner.
And would I be wrong to guess, based on his face, that he was kind of a dick?
No, no, actually, no. Um, Pretty successful governor of Kentucky, by the way. Solid governor of Kentucky. Um, Fun fact, though, his son died at the Battle of Okinawa. He was the commander of the U.S. Army there, the 10th Army.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I think
one of
you
my
told
favorite.
me that during the World War II video. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, one of my favorite little stories of that was when one of the fortified Japanese positions was taken. It was taken by some Southerners who had a rebel flag on them, so they raised the Confederate flag, and apparently, like the guys who are from the North were like, "What are we supposed to do? Start whistling Dixie right now?"
Yeah.
Buckner, the commander of the army, hears about that and goes like, "Well, I can't fault him. I mean, my dad fought under that flag, you know."
Yeah. So I
But
guess back
anyway,
then though it wouldn't have been seen as offensive, so they'd just be like, all right, whatever. I'm not really into this Southern shit because I'm from New Jersey. Whatever. As long as you guys
well, I
have
mean,
some victory cigars, we'll just let it be.
just as a side, I mean, back then the country is majority white, like what 85%, you know, and I start to think that the reason that the pro-Confederate stuff was put up with was for a number of reasons. One of them is that the nation, they were still veterans from the Civil War, not many, but there were still some veterans around when World War II was being fought, and so you have people who are sons and grandsons who are told stories of the war, and you need to placate them to get these people to be loyal Americans willing to do things like fight the Germans and the Japanese, right?
Right.
You just don't need that anymore. It's not needed. Not important. The proportion of people in America descended from Confederate veterans who would care is much lower than it was in the 1940s. So the need to placate them to make sure they're loyal citizens is just that much less. I think that plays its own part in sort of stuff going on right now. It's not needed. But you got to go deal with the Great Depression and go fight Hitler and Tojo. That's something you need. So yeah, they just put up with it. Anyway, it's one of my favorite little stories. I first heard about that reading the book With the Old Breed, which was one of the basis for the HBO show The Pacific.
Oh.
And of course, the guy who wrote that, Sledge, he is from Alabama, descended from Confederate soldiers, and he mentions that stuff. Like, he's happy when the Confederate flag goes up there. He has a few like positive passages in the book about Confederate infantry. So that's a thing for him. But yeah, the idea that you'd have these white male Southerners who would look to their Confederate ancestors and be like, well, they fought hard, and especially if they were with Lee, they kicked a lot of ass. So that gives you a kind of martial tradition or culture to look up to, But we don't really need that anymore, I guess. So who cares? Anyway, getting to General Buckner. General Buckner, of course, was the third in command at Fort Donelson. He insisted they surrender. It was very much a defeatist attitude. My research on Fort Donelson indicates the garrison was really willing to fight it out, and a lot of them were disgusted by him surrendering. Nevertheless, he is a prominent Kentuckian. He had played a large role in organizing and disciplining Kentucky soldiers before and then during and then the early days of the war. And he was fairly charismatic. He was obsessed with personal honor and dignity. Very much obsessed with it. So very much somebody wants to appear to be like a broad-minded gentleman, if you will. For instance, he didn't like brag. But he made sure, for instance, the Tullahoma campaign, Buckner rushed to Bragg's assistance right away when he needed it. So Buckner really is somebody trying to be fair and broad-minded, which you can also see in his governorship of Kentucky. Well, anyway, Buckner will find himself commanding a corps at Chickamauga. He does okay, but once you keep in mind this is his first combat command since Fort Donelson, he hadn't done so well there either. Then, when the battle's over, he intrigues against Bragg, so Buckner falls out of favor and then gets shipped off to the Trans-Mississippi. Now, what can we say for Buckner as a general, as a corps commander? Well, he was good at organization and discipline, and his men generally liked him. Once again, most people liked him. But he wasn't a very good tactician. He did poorly at Fort Donelson at the end of the day. Very poorly, I would say, and not much better at Chickamauga. Honestly, got to go with an E. He's also a big disappointment. A lot of people, when the war started, thought Buckner was going to be one of the heavy hitters, and he just wasn't.
So he was sort of the Kwame Brown of the Confederate Corps commanders.
All right, is that a basketball player?
It is.
All right, tell me more about this man before
he
we
was the
continue.
number 1 draft pick in 2001. He came straight out of high school, drafted by Michael Jordan himself. And Jordan was a part owner of the Wizards at the time. Then he came out of retirement, played alongside of Kwame Brown, and basically told him that he sucks after Kwame didn't blossom immediately. And Kwame lasted for 12 or 13 years, but never really averaged more than 8 or 9 points in any single season. He also then later famously played alongside of Kobe during the post-Shaq era, and Lakers fans are unforgiving when their team isn't good, so a lot of people like to say that Kobe's best years were wasted playing alongside of Kwame Brown, and they blame him for not being better.
Yeah, God, you had a point there. I mean, I don't know in the last few years. I remember about 10 years ago, like after the Patriots won some Super Bowls, but then when they would lose, they would get booed by their own fans. And I'm like, this team's like 12-4. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
that's the
right.
thing with Lakers fans that I've never gotten, because I've known plenty of Lakers fans, because it's basically half the NBA base are Lakers fans. Easily. And, yeah, anytime that their team is not in contention for the championship, they're extremely upset. Because they almost feel entitled to win every year, even though there are 30 teams in the league.
I think it's changed a little bit by proportion, but I want to say when I looked at it 10 years ago, half the championship titles are owned by the Celtics and the Lakers.
It's a lot. I mean, I think each team now has 17 titles, and the NBA's only been in existence since 1950-something. Maybe 1948 at the oldest.
1960s Celtics. That's some dominance, man. They won the championship 9 out of 10 years.
Yes, Bill Russell only played 13 seasons, won 11 championships.
Holy shit!
So he has a real chance. I mean, he has a real case for being the greatest of all time. 1946 is when it was founded. Excuse me.
Okay,
but
still, like it's ungodly, man. Like the Lakers and the Celtics own just so much.
No, it is. It's almost dumb in a way. Also, one argument against it being rigged, though, is that you would think because New York is a huge place in terms of basketball fandom, and also in terms of the media market, you would think they would always have a good team. Because a lot of people believe that the league is a little bit rigged to help the Lakers. But New York consistently sucks. I mean, this season they've gotten decent, and in the 90s they were decent, and then 1972 or so they won the title. But for the most part, most of their history is being ass.
So we're talking about the Knicks here, right? Not the Nets.
Right, the Knicks. The Nets this year are a super team, but usually they also suck. At least that's their typical trajectory. I mean, they also had the Jason Kidd era in the early 2000s, and they had a little 2013-14 team where they traded all of their future assets for some aging stars, and then it didn't work out. But anyway.
Yeah, that tactic doesn't often work. I mean, sometimes it does in football, in the NFL sometimes it does, but not too often. You want to do this Richard Anderson and then take a quick break?
Sounds good to me. Richard H. Anderson. I know you think he's a pretty good commander.
He is. He kind of surprised people too because he was rather unassuming, not a particularly gregarious personality. He was known for being a hard marcher, though. As a division commander, he did well, but he had some bad moments, particularly Gettysburg. He didn't do very well at Gettysburg. At any rate, Longstreet is wounded when the Battle of the Wilderness. Lee had discussion about who should take over the Corps, and he was essentially told that Anderson should because he was senior, he was experienced, but also the I forgot which officer was advising him, but he said, "Hey, we know Anderson. He served with Longstreet for years. We trust him. Give him the Corps command." Anderson gets the march on the Union and gets to Spotsylvania before they do. Now, that's actually not because Anderson's being a genius, by the way. The reason is because his men were camped near a fire. And he was like, we shouldn't be camped here. We got to keep on moving. Also, I've heard stories that the fire was also burning up some bodies. So there was a smell of burning flesh. And they were like, you know what? Let's just march away from here. But he gets to Spotsylvania, sets up a strong defensive position, holds it. He's going to do well almost throughout this time. And eventually Lee is impressed enough with Anderson that he ensures that he commands what is basically the Fourth Corps. So yeah, Lee will be having 4 corps under his command in the Petersburg campaign, and Anderson eventually takes over the Fourth Corps, if you will. But no, Anderson was a good hard marcher. He could place his men well. They had confidence in him. I couldn't rate him too highly because he wasn't called to pull off too many complicated attack maneuvers, for instance, which were more difficult for him. But overall, Anderson exceeded most people's expectations. I would give him a B.
All right. From what I understand, were some of the field troops reallocated from Ewell to Anderson, and then Ewell was basically given the garrison troops around Richmond, and it was still called a corps command?
No. What Anderson took over for was Anderson commanded the First Corps. Then Longstreet comes back, right? By that time, Beauregard's been sent south, so he actually takes over Beauregard's corps.
Oh. And I guess Beauregard's corps was kind of the hodgepodge unit that was put together, but it was actually pretty effective.
Yeah, but Beauregard's corps is the troops that he led at Drury's Bluff and Petersburg, about 2 divisions worth of men. Mostly, I mean, there were some veteran brigades in there, but a lot of them were men who mostly knew garrison work. But hey, Beauregard's a good commander. And under him, they won a series of battles, so they actually became a pretty effective outfit overall. So yeah, when Longstreet comes back, Lee's like, hey, Longstreet's taking your job back, but you did very well. I'm going to make sure you remain in Corps command. So he gets command of Fourth Corps.
Good for him. I mean, then he just got to starve over the winter with his new corps, but at least he was a corps commander, had that extra star.
Yeah. Starve, man. That's terrible. All right. Let's take a quick break, okay?
All right. We will be back in a few minutes, everybody.
And then we'll do some super chats when we get back, and then get back into these guys.
right. You back yet?
Yeah, right here.
All right. You want to do a couple more super chats before we get back to the rest of these individuals?
Yeah, sure. We got two of them here. We
Yeah.
got a Nerve AMV maker for $5. Thank you very much. How'd you rank Andrew Jackson as a commander in general? You got any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, I know he obviously won the Battle of New Orleans, which is a fairly major battle, but I've never really read anything in detail about his military career.
I've read a few things about him. He seemed to be very, very effective. Keeping in mind he was mostly commanding militia forces, if you will, like Tennessee state forces in the War of 1812. He had success at Horseshoe Bend. If you look at his defense of New Orleans, he sets up his terrain well. He does. I mean, he's not a defeatist at all. Like Jackson, of course, but Jackson's the kind of man who would fight you to the ultimate, to the death, right? So he's a perfect man for a position like when he's defending New Orleans, when he has limited resources, he's outnumbered, and he needs to show nerve and energy as much as anything else. That said, I don't. Jackson, while he showed abilities in organization, logistics, leadership, and tactics, and he was in some tough spots, I'd feel a little bit hard calling him a genius because it wasn't like he had some brilliant campaign. So, for instance, New Orleans, while it's an impressive victory, the British are laboring under a lot of constraints, mostly due to terrain. While Horseshoe Bend is really a battle that it's Jackson's to lose. But I do rate him very highly myself.
Okay. And our second super chat comes to us from Diogenes for $5. Thank you. Would y'all ever make a stream talking about philosophy? Also, thoughts on the presidency so far? So, a lot of questions.
What would you do about... That's a good question. Well, what would you... Two questions. What would you do about philosophy?
I think we could do a stream talking about philosophical concepts. We would need to have it fairly narrowly defined before we went into it, though. So, for instance, we could each read the same philosopher's work, maybe a couple different works by the same person, and then talk about a philosopher or something specific, a school of philosophy. Maybe even a single work if it's influential enough. But I think for something like that to work, we would need to focus fairly narrowly.
I like philosophy a lot, and I enjoy talking about it in broad strokes, but mostly when it has a more practical application. So political philosophy fascinates me a lot, and I'm decent on that. If you get into things like metaphysics, no, thank you.
Yeah, I can do metaphysics, ethics, that kind of stuff. But yeah, political philosophy is something I prefer. I find it more useful, more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I know some broad strokes for it, but it's a hard topic for me. And also, man, I haven't really like gotten into that like I used to. You know, like when I was in Kentucky, we had the course in the Enlightenment, and there's some other stuff I was reading Rousseau. Yeah, but you know, like I mean, that could be something further down the line that I would be interested in. As far as the Biden presidency goes, what are you thinking?
To keep it brief, I don't know if disappointing's the right word, just because, as you all know, my predictions were not terribly optimistic in terms of him actually getting things done. Clearly, he does not know the meaning of 2000 or immediately, and the failure of the Democrats to get the minimum wage on the COVID relief package is pretty embarrassing. Yeah, it's also he's kind of abandoned the idea of doing a public option, even though that was one of his original tenets starting when he announced his campaign. So I think that things aren't going super well for Uncle Joe, and he is not putting the Democratic Party in a very good position going forward.
What about his approval rating being over 60%?
I think that's mostly in response to him expediting the timeline on COVID. So in the short run, it looks like he's doing great. The problem is, as soon as COVID's over, give it a 6 months, people will forget about it mostly, and then they'll focus on the things he failed to do.
Hmm.
So I don't think that he'll end up getting much credit for anything positive he does on vaccines.
He also seems to. There seem to have been a lot of problems getting people appointed to positions. I heard Neera Tanden failed.
Yeah, although that one's pretty predictable. Tandon was an odd person to try to put up for that. Clearly has a lot of enemies she's made on the right. She's made a lot of enemies on the left. It's really... she was not the kind of person who was going to be able to clear through Congress very easily. And I felt like, if anything, nominating her was politically stupid. I assume it was supposed to be a sop to the Hillary wing of the party, and maybe even to Hillary herself, because Tandon is not really qualified to run anything in the government because she has no actual experience in the government. She's always run the Center for American Progress, which is basically just a centrist think tank. And the other thing that she does is get in Twitter fights in the middle of the night and call people names. So,
always a good sign.
Yeah,
always a good look.
She's not really qualified for anything, and calling people racist or sexist or whatever because they don't support her, that's not going to change that the senators are not going to vote for her because she called them stuff on Twitter. I mean, it's just not. So there are a lot of people who didn't want her to get it, and she created a large coalition against her. So that was a very dumb move on the part of the Biden administration. I think most of the nominations will go down with this first round picks, but a lot of the nominations are very safe choices and people who just aren't really that interesting and, by the standards of Washington, controversial.
Well, one question I have though about her is that one thing was pointed out was that she's no friend to the left, but the left actually went in to support her. She got shot down by the right of the party.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I did not see that coming, actually, the Manchin wing of the party coming down on her. I thought it would be a coalition of Republicans and the left. It ended up being the more natural allies of the Republicans, the right-wing centrist types, the corporate people, the Manchins and Cinemas of the world. But, again, Neera Tanden has a way of alienating people who are not within her immediate ideological space.
Gotcha.
Because she's not exactly the world's nicest person.
This is true. The Biden presidency, and some of this I'm going to draw from a discussion I had with some other people a few days ago. In some ways, I mean, one of the smarter things they did was making it to where, Biden's like, I'll have 100 vaccines out in 100 days. It's like, yeah, he was lowballing that,
So you think he's doing the Scotty strategy from Star Trek? You gotta
definitely.
lowball it so that way people think you're a fucking genius when you do a little better than what you promised.
I mean, it's pretty simple. The other strategy is promise you the moon, which was the Trump strategy. But I mean, hey, that's how Trump got laid for decades. So
I'm giving her all I got, sir.
But so he did that one, which was pretty smart. It's really gone down exactly as I thought it would. They're politically, in economics, it's pretty conservative. When it comes to social issues, they're I don't know if far left's the right term, but they're pretty left on that. But they would be. It doesn't affect anybody's bottom line, And as far as foreign policy goes, have they done anything big?
They bombed Syria, but I guess that's pretty much boilerplate at this point. Got to bomb somebody.
I heard that was. I heard that was like reaction against a rocket attack or something. In other words, I heard it was very much like, well, you hit us. Nobody died, but you hit us, so we got to hit you back, Because while I'm firmly on the anti-war left, I didn't hear the attack on Syria and think, oh God, we're going in there right now. I just thought like, oh, is this like, standard American, like, oh, we're just going to bomb you.
I
That's what
think
we
that's what
do.
it was. I think it's just, hey, Raytheon needs to sell some more bombs, so we need to use up some of the stockpile. Where can we bomb? Syria. Sure thing.
Yeah, my feeling is that they're already retreating on almost every economic issue there is. And so we have to see how it plays out. And I know we're going to, of course, do our thing on the Trump presidency, our retrospective. And I'd love to do ones on, of course, Bush and Clinton and Obama and anybody else you want to get into. But
I think we
uh,
could actually start with Reagan. I think there's enough there. Or maybe even go back to Nixon, because at least with Nixon, there's a lot of good stories, too.
oh, yeah, I'd love doing the Nixon one. Don't worry, I'll make sure the whiskey is flowing for that one. All right. But so I think, though, with I doubt Biden's ability to handle the economic repercussions of COVID. And I get a kind of listless feeling from the Biden administration. And to be fair to it, though, I've kind of gotten a listless feeling from a lot of presidents. Like I got that in Obama's first year. We definitely got that in Trump's first year. I'm just getting the same feeling. Like I don't feel like we have somebody who's in charge and knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I don't feel like there's a very firm hand on the tiller.
Yeah. So we'll have to see how it plays out. Yeah. I know neither one of us are optimistic, though.
Although I
But
do have to
yeah.
say, so far, my impression of Biden's leadership is that he, as a leader, is very different than most recent presidents. Not only, as you said, does he tend to underpromise and then try to overdeliver to make himself look smart. Another thing he does is rather than playing out the idea of he's fighting for us, he doesn't do that kind of theater at all, really. What he does is he just pronounces things. He just kind of says what he thinks is going to happen, and he waits till the last minute to do it. So he just kind of drops bombs in that way.
Huh, what's an example of that?
So, for instance, with the minimum wage fight, he basically said ahead of time, "Yeah, this isn't going to happen, guys." Rather than doing the Obama-esque, "Well, I'm doing everything I can, and it's ultimately up to someone else. If it fails, don't blame me." Biden basically just got it in front of it and said, "Yeah, not going to happen, whatever." Or when it came to the, did I say $2,000 checks? 1,400's more like it. And he just kind of dropped those bombs. He did so in such a direct way people aren't used to that they didn't notice. Or with the dropping of the public option early on, that was, I think, what, day 3 or 4? He just kind of said it one day among the other executive orders he was doing. He's like, "Oh yeah, we're not going forward with this." Also, so there's no theater of the fight with Biden. He just kind of either does things or doesn't do them. So
I
I don't
think
know.
that
I mean, what people will think of that overall, but it's a huge departure in terms of the how things play out and how it will be reported upon.
I do want to say three things I'm really following right now, and then we'll get back to the Confederates, of course. But three things I'm really following with this is just with the political climate we're in. One is the degree to which Biden has the full backing of media and corporations, right? So, yeah, and this has been commented by a variety of people. Matt Taibbi talked about it a bit on their last Useful Idiots thing with Rolling Stone. You know about that, right? I
Oh
mean, they're
yeah, with
gone.
Katie Halper, and yeah, it's a great
Oh
show.
yeah. Now, I'm actually going to get to that one in a sec too, because that's part of the other thing I'm following. But what's interesting to me about that is the the degree to which media was mainstream media had diverse opinions 10, 15 years ago. We can debate, no doubt about it. At no point in my lifetime, and I think at no point in American history, has it been so locked in and conformist the way it is right now. They mostly just say the same shit. It's kind of boring. And to me, an interesting thing to follow is, does that mean that you get even more of an echo chamber effect within the Biden administration where they know the media has their back because they're just throwing softball questions? I mean, occasionally some reporter will, get their goat up and ask him something, but it's few and far between. I mean, Biden's saying and doing weird shit like Trump did, but nobody talks about it. And I believe some of that is because they don't think democracy works. They think we're all idiots and that they can simply manipulate the narrative the way it is. Now, I don't mean that there's like some cabal of people in a smoky room deciding exactly how that works, but I think it's kind of they've all come to this general conclusion together, and they're all kind of on the same page. Maybe not always tactically, but at least in terms of their philosophy of things. So, seeing how those media echo chambers plays out is of interest to me because, I mean, Twitter's done a lot of purges of mostly right-wing voices, and they have people on Twitter now where you have to pay money to get their tweets, and I'm thinking, like, I mean, is Twitter going to die because it's just like a left-wing echo chamber where you pay money to get premium tweets? I mean, that sounds like crap to me, I always thought Twitter was crap.
Yeah,
So I'm kind of following that. I'm kind of following that with the media thing, which ties into the Matt Taibbi thing because the, dissident Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, a variety of them, they haven't really been canceled per se. I wouldn't use that word because I believe canceled is where it's like you'll never work in this town again. All right, but a lot of the perks they had have been taken away from. Like Matt Taibbi's not with Rolling Stone. That guy Nathan J. Robinson, who dresses really well, I'll say. I don't like the guy, but he dresses well, and he lives in New Orleans. So maybe I'll see him around here. But he got fired from his Guardian job, and that one Red Scare podcast got kicked off the Spotify thing. And there's another one I can't remember right now. Cornel West didn't get tenure, and all these people, for the most part, have in common is that none of them are Biden people. They're all fairly critical of what he's doing, and none of them are that hopeful of what he's going to do. And I think it's a coincidence that those people are losing what influence or position they had within major left-leaning institutions. And watching their reactions to that and the knowledge that the Sanders wing is not just beat but crushed is of interest to me. I want to see where they go from here. And at the same time, I'm interested just to see what all those dissonant right voices do at this point, since the God Emperor is no more. Hell, a lot of them seem to be talking about crypto a bunch.
Yeah. All right.
Like that guy Keith Woods had an hour-long crypto interview, and I'm like, okay.
We actually do have one last super chat before we move on, and that comes to us from Speedy Sphincter for $5. Thoughts on hockey? I feel like it's growing, but that's just me being from STL, which I assume is
St. Louis.
St. Louis, okay. And us winning the cup a few years ago. It's a brutal sport. I want to add, is baseball going the way of the dinosaur? So I actually don't have very many thoughts on hockey. On the rare occasions where I catch it on TV, usually during the Winter Olympics, I find it to be a very fast-paced and exciting sport. I also, in general, think that hockey games look super cool. Hockey video games, I mean. But it's something that I've never actually revisited in depth. So every time I see it, I think, oh, that looks cool. I should get more into that. And then I never do.
Yeah.
I actually have no idea if it's growing or not. I couldn't really tell you. As for baseball, I don't think it's declining enough to die. But then again, I also don't keep up with baseball. Literally, when it comes to sports, the only one I keep up with at all is basketball. If anything, the sport I know the second most about is probably pro wrestling, if you want to count that as a sport. Although I don't keep up with the modern version of it that much.
Remember, man, people say about Tom Brady with all of his rings. Remember, Ric Flair still has more championships than Tom Brady.
The wheeling and dealing, kiss stealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun. The nature boy Ric Flair. Woo!
I love that. That was my favorite post Buccaneers winning meme.
Yeah.
Although I put money on the Buccaneers because I had a dream where they won. It was hilarious too because when they in my dream, like, they won, Tom Brady lifted up the trophy, he was MVP. Then he went to the locker room and turned into a werewolf. I woke up and I was like, okay, they're gonna win.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't follow hockey in any detail. The sport I know the most about, or used to know a lot about, was NFL, and I still kind of vaguely knows what happens there. Um, I do lightly follow baseball and basketball to a lesser degree. I don't follow hockey at all. Nothing against the sport, though. I've been to a game. I've seen it on TV. I know people are into it, and I can see where the attraction is. My only thing about hockey, though, is that one of the two things I think that keeps hockey from getting more popular is one, it's very regional. You can't just throw down and just play random hockey in New Orleans. You just can't. So the number of people give a shit about hockey around here, it's very few. So it's kind of blocked in the South. And if you think about it, the NFL is not, because it's mostly played as the weather is getting colder, so you can play it in the South. And of course, it's popular up north too. So I feel like the NFL, by the nature of when it's played, that helps. But also commercials. Football games are perfect for television commercials. Hockey is not. Hockey's a tough one on that. By the way, same thing with basketball as far as the NFL goes. Basketball can be played all over the country. That's hence its popularity. At the same time, look at baseball. While baseball has its pockets of popularity in the South, it was never as popular as it was in the North because it's played in the summertime. And I'm sorry, guys, it's fucking hot down here. So, but I don't know. I know baseball about 3-4 years ago got kind of a boost from the Cubs winning and some other stuff. And I think baseball is doing better right now than they were when you had the steroid scandal. Like, that was some bad stuff for baseball. So I don't know. I don't think baseball's going anywhere, honestly. Still popular up north, and sure, it kind of sucks on TV, but it's great to watch live. I love going to baseball games.
Yeah, watching it live is not bad. I can't watch it on TV at all.
TV, and I'll do if it's like a World Series or a playoff game, and you can get some good stuff on there if the game's close. But yeah, TV. That's the thing is, once television got big, football replaced baseball, and I think some of that's because football is just easier for television. It's more, it's better made for that than baseball is. I mean, baseball game live. I mean, you're just watching it. You're hanging out with people. You got that whole it has a whole 19th century Gilded Age feel where it's a bit more relaxed, if you will. I don't know. I love watching baseball games live.
All right. Well, speaking of things that are kind of old-fashioned and slow-paced, how about Braxton Bragg?
Braxton Bragg is not slow-paced.
Oh, really? I mean, I was just making an assumption to try to make a transition.
Yeah, I know, man. But no, Bragg, we're only talking about as a Corps commander. Army commander, I mean, they got multiple books on that subject. Now, to be fair to Bragg, he only commands a corps in one battle, but it's the Battle of Shiloh, so it's a doozy. Now, when the war starts, Bragg is given the command in the Gulf states, protecting Mobile and Pensacola. He complained, felt that Davis put him there because he and Davis had quarreled before the Civil War. They were not friends. Keep that in mind. Not friends. That's a myth. Get that out of your minds. But Bragg suggests sending more soldiers north for a concentration. Bragg helps concentrate the armies at Corinth on the eve of Shiloh. He is made not only commander of the Second Corps, which is Albert Sidney Johnston's largest corps, but also chief of staff of the army. Now at Shiloh, Bragg gives a rather erratic performance. On the one hand, he will launch some unsupported brigade attacks where the men get just absolutely chewed up. Most infamously, Gibson's brigade, which makes 3 separate charges on an impregnable Union position. Well, 4 if you count the 1st Arkansas Regiment, which went in an extra time. So, and Bragg blamed Gibson and even claimed the men were cowards. I mean, it's pretty disgusting what he did there. But if you look at that beforehand, he helped break Sherman's first line. When he found out that Johnston died, he stepped right up to the plate. He went over to the right flank where things had quieted, where there was a bit of a lull in the battle. He ordered fresh attacks. He actually led some men into an attack on the Union's position there and broke the left flank. He was then organizing an attack on Pittsburgh Landing when he was told to stand down. Now, when Bragg stood down near Pittsburgh Landing, his reaction to that is heavily debated in the Shiloh literature. The classic literature had Bragg being upset that they weren't attacking the last Union line. There's some evidence that maybe he wasn't that upset. Here's my conjecture. When Bragg was told to stop attacking, he probably thought that's reasonable. It probably over time, but especially after they lost the battle, it ate away at him. That should also be kept in mind. On the second day of battle, while Bragg did launch one or two unsupported bonehead attacks, he does organize a competent defense and shifts men around effectively. And I have to say, Shiloh is one of the only battles where Bragg actually showed battlefield charisma. One of my favorite lines I ran into is he rode up to the 1st Louisiana and he said, "My old bodyguard, I see your numbers are diminished, but not your spirit." Stuff like that, which he doesn't do later on. And I honestly think, Bragg's gotten a lot of criticism for Shiloh. When I've really dug into it, I think there's a bit more there. Honestly, I think Bragg probably would have been a decent Corps commander. Also, should be kept in mind, Bragg was good at following orders, so he wasn't the kind of Corps commander who, if somebody gave an order, he would have been like, hell no. He'd have been like, all right, I'll carry out to the best of my ability. So I'm giving him a C.
All right. That's interesting. It's good to know that Bragg was better at something other than Army Command.
The reason he gets a C, though, is, man, his handling of Gibson's brigade where they hurtled themselves in the Hornet's Nest, that's abysmal. Honestly, if it wasn't for that, I'd be giving him an A or a B based on what he did. But wow. That was a shitty episode. But that episode, it's bad. And you realize that, Bragg really is a man of great strengths and horrible weaknesses. And when he was good, but when he was bad, damn awful.
Yeah.
He's very erratic.
All right.
Here we go.
Jubal A. Early.
Yep.
The man who famously got a plate broken over his head at West Point for being a dick.
And also got a character named after him in the show Firefly, which I'm not a fan of, but I actually don't like that show, but friends of mine were watching an episode, and the guy's like, "My name is Jubal Early," and I was like, "What, General?"
Yeah, that's I kind of like that show. I mean, I don't think it's as good as a lot of people say it is, but it's good.
I gotta tell you, man, when people were watching that, everybody loved it. I did not like it, and one guy I knew said it was okay, and that was the opinion that was closest to mine. Otherwise, everybody else I knew thought it was fucking the greatest thing ever, man. The best show since Sanford and Son. I don't know.
Sanford and Son. Wow, that's a throwback, huh?
Hey, man, Sanford and Son is one of the best sitcoms ever made. Just putting that out there, all right?
Yeah, also, anyway, the Fred Sanford tactic of faking a heart attack to get out of trouble, I think that is the best tactic to use if you're an older gentleman.
Yeah, what about the Seinfeld episode where they catch, I think Jerry catches, it's either a relative or, his dad's friend who's old and he's stealing. And he says, "All old people steal. When we get caught, we just act confused." He's not lying. I thought. Turns out my grandpa was shoplifting. One time we were in the car, he just pulled out a giant bag of Reese's Pieces. They just shoved into his pocket.
Wow.
I will admit, if they had caught him, he would have been like, "I don't know what I'm doing."
Do you think? Do you think he did it on purpose though?
Yeah, I know. He wanted that Reese's Pieces. He stole it. He wanted to eat some Reese's Pieces.
All right.
All right, Jubal Early, though. Jubal Early found himself thrust into Corps Command at Spotsylvania. He did very well. Lee eventually leans quite a bit on Jubal Early. And where you can really see Lee's confidence in him is when he dispatches troops to the Shenandoah Valley. Now, he chooses 2nd Corps. This is for a variety of reasons. One of the big ones is that it's the one corps that Lee can part with because after Cold Harbor, especially at Spotsylvania. They took heavy losses, so it's Lee's weakest corps. It's also the corps that has men who did fight in the Valley under Jackson. Now, not a lot of them, but there's still some. So they have something there. But also, I believe Lee looked at the corps commanders he had, and he thought to himself, Early is probably the one who can work on his own best. And Early does superbly there. Drives up to Washington, D.C., threatens the city, wins a battle at Kernstown. By the time Sheridan comes for Early, Sheridan has a crushing numerical advantage, it must be said. But that said, while Early is defeated at 3rd Winchester and Fisher's Hill, he attacks him at Cedar Creek. Now, okay, Cedar Creek is a Union victory, but the Confederates inflicted heavy losses on the Union forces, gained surprise, and you can make a case that if Sheridan hadn't been able to rally the men and get them to attack, which is stuff he was good at, if Sheridan had been gone, the Confederates might have won Cedar Creek. And Cedar Creek's a very bold plan. So, I don't know. Early showed himself to be good at operational maneuver. He won a number of victories. The battles he lost, he was pretty much... the enemy had a crushing numerical advantage. He did have some problems with subordinates, but I would say less so than Jackson. Honestly, I'd give Early an A.
All right.
Yeah. Now, of course, he got blamed for losing the Shenandoah Valley, but you really got to emphasize that. I mean, when I say crushing numerical advantage, like a 3rd Winchester, Sheridan has almost a 3-to-1 advantage, and his cavalry is capable of pursuit and charging, and they're large and organized. And that is an advantage that almost no other Union commander had, or commander during this war ever had. Because, cavalry in America was few. It takes years for a man to become a good cavalryman, and also our tactics weren't made for charging and pursuit. Our cavalry were based on delaying, scouting, and raiding. And that's why a lot of the cavalry commanders of the Civil War actually turned to be great at things like raiding and scouting, right? Especially raiding. Yeah, I would say if the Civil War cavalrymen had one, I would say, decent advantage over his European counterparts, it was definitely in the raiding category. But yeah, I'm very impressed with Jubal Early.
Okay. How about former Vice President John C. Breckinridge?
Man, this is sad to say, because Breckinridge was so good at division command. His men loved him too. He was charismatic, fair-minded, brave, but he finds himself leading a corps at Chattanooga. And it is completely beyond his abilities. Breckinridge was never good at discipline. He insisted his men were gentlemen. When he found an officer like scolding a private, he said, "My men are no menial servants." I mean, this makes him popular with men, but it also means that his forces tended not to have the best discipline. His staff work was rather poor, and he tended, even as a division commander, to kind of feed men in piecemeal. And so when he gets elevated to corps command, he hadn't really done much to have it, except for the fact of his political position and charisma. He does horrible at Chattanooga. His corps gets routed. It's one of the worst corps performances for a Confederate in the entire war. At any rate, he's going to spend the rest of the war commanding a division, Newmarket, and then a division under Jubal Early. Well, he does very well. But he is about 2 months in corps command. It's pretty much an F. It's F quality, I hate to say.
Huh. That's interesting.
I think it was beyond his abilities.
Because I know in the Newmarket book by William C. Davis, who of course is a huge fan of Breckinridge, he is basically over the moon about how awesome Breckinridge was in that battle.
Oh, he is, though. But that's the thing is, at Newmarket, he's essentially commanding a division. And while his division command at Shiloh, his command at Shiloh was decent, he wasn't so good at Stones River. But you get to Newmarket, and the Shenandoah Valley does very well. And division command is something that he, over time, mastered. But he got thrown to Corps Command, and he was way over his head. So
Interesting.
yeah. I mean, Davis's praise for Breckinridge is not poorly placed. And by the way, I'm not rating him based on division or brigade command, if you will. Breckinridge would be much higher on here. But as a corps commander, not what he's capable of doing.
All right. Next up, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is Benjamin F. Cheatham.
Yes, Benjamin Franklin Cheatham. Wait, who was he named after? Benjamin Franklin. Oh, anyway,
I don't
so
know, some obscure guy from Philadelphia.
yeah, Cheatham's interesting. A notorious alcoholic, but also like a fairly good drill master and good at discipline. Made sure his men had good food and equipment overall, so very, 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 very popular with his soldiers. Cheatham was an acclaimed division commander in the Confederate Army. Now he had turned in uneven performances at Shiloh and Stones River, but he did very well at Perryville, and I would say pretty well at Chickamauga too. Well, Cheatham found himself in command of Hood's Corps temporarily at Atlanta. He's ordered to make an attack. The chances of success are pretty low, but Cheatham's new to command. The attacks weren't very well done. When Hardee is sent out, Cheatham replaces him over Cleburne, which I think is understandable given Cheatham's experience and status in the Army. As a Corps commander, not very good. It's over his head. His staff work is going to be very, very poor. He fails to block the road at Spring Hill or even to notice what's going on. His attacks at Franklin are not well coordinated. He handles his corps fairly well on the first day of Nashville, but also it wasn't. I mean, he was being attacked by like 3 Union brigades, and the brigades are mostly made up of raw soldiers, like a lot of black soldiers in those who had never seen combat before. So, and also the ground was good for defense. The commanders of the black soldiers had not scoured the ground properly, so the men suffered significant losses and fell back. But then on the next day, Cheatham's left flank is shattered. Now, how much of that is his fault? Man, that's debatable. I mean, the Union attacked Compton Hill, which later on became known as Shies Hill, and where they attacked, the Confederates had been unable to set up proper defensive positions. They've been under heavy artillery fire. The Union used terrain very well, so it's a little hard to gauge Cheatham on that level. That said, nothing he did showed that Corps command was something he was good at. So if I rate him as a division commander, he'd be like a B or a C, but Corps command, I go with an F.
So I'm getting the impression that the Army of Tennessee, the B team, maybe their corps commanders are a little shittier than the Army of Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
So what do you think would happen historically if, say, they had done an officer transfer and then Lee had under his command, say, Cheatham, Polk, and Stewart, and then in the Army of Tennessee, Joe Johnston or Bragg had Longstreet and Jackson? You think, how much of a difference do you think that would have made?
I don't know. Lee had the ability to inspire men to gain their trust and confidence. Not everybody, of course, but most people. I believe Lee's ability to work with others and get the best out of them is one of, if not his finest attribute. And some of these men Lee could have probably worked with. But keep in mind, Jackson and Longstreet are difficult men, very talented men, but very difficult men. And Lee got a lot out of both those men. So who knows? He could have here, but think about it too. He wasn't able to get much out of Ewell, and Hill took a while to develop. So it's not entirely just Lee. And once again, Longstreet and Jackson had a lot of native ability, and Lee saw that in both men. So Lee's also a superb judge of military talent. It's not like there's very few Confederate generals that Lee was favorable to who you read about and go, this guy's an idiot. It just doesn't happen. I think that's one of Lee's finest abilities, was his ability to discern talent. Anyway, there's also a question of quality. There's this book called Two Great Rebel Armies that makes the argument that the Army of Northern Virginia was just better than the Army of Tennessee. The Army of Northern Virginia had more West Point graduates. Also, the Army was mostly made up of Confederates who had enlisted early in the conflict. That is, the men who really want to be in there. And the Army of Tennessee has a lot of regiments that were raised like after Bull Run or around the time of Bull Run, or of course, or also in 1862. They're made up of men who may not be the most excited about getting into battle. They had more political officers in the Army as well. Polk and Cheatham and Breckinridge, all three of those men are political officers. Granted, Polk had West Point training, but let's be fair. West Point training was mostly engineering and French. They didn't really learn tactics that much. And he wasn't in the Army very long. So...
Yeah, I like to think of West Point during this time as that one episode of The Next Generation where Picard says, battle is but a small province in what a captain does.
Yeah.
Even though they do have a lot of fucking battles, but okay, whatever.
Not that many, really.
Well, I mean,
right?
towards the end of the show, as the Borg start to become more prominent, they do. And then, I mean, DS9 is literally a war series.
Yeah, I should probably watch DS9, right?
You should. I think you would I think you would like DS9 more than any other Star Trek. In some ways, it's almost a Western, if that makes sense. I mean, you'd have to watch it for that to make sense, but...
Oh, no. I've seen some episodes. I can totally see that. I mean, they're on the frontier.
Yeah.
I probably should check out DS9 sometime. No, I mean, I've seen some episodes. DS9's good. It's good. I'm not a big Next Gen fan. I like some episodes of Next Gen, but it's not my favorite thing. Like I think bad Next Gen is like really bad. Like bad Kirk Star Trek, even when it's bad, I still kind of find it funny and charming.
Like the episode where he fights the alligator man in the paper mache suit.
Great. Dude, the Gorn, that's fucking great. I love that. Like he's battling them and he's got that. Oh god, it's so good.
Dude, I found the Gorn action figure in a local hobby shop around here, and I almost bought it, but at that time I was broke. The one time I found it, because otherwise I'd have gotten that thing and put it in a position of prominence in my office, but, you know. Such is life.
That's a, like, bad, such is life. C'est la vie. Look, bad Kirk Star Trek has got, like, some amusing charm to it. I think bad Next Gen is just sad.
Although I do have to say, one thing I appreciate is that one time I saw something from Twitter. I mean, I wasn't on Twitter. It's just something somebody made about the Star Trek people. And it was a quote by Will Wheaton, or the guy who plays Wesley Crusher, whatever his name is. And he was bitching about something and being annoying. And then Patrick Stewart responded, "Shut up, Wesley."
Yes. Also, I don't know, Next Gen movies were mostly disappointing, and, you know, Kirk movies were mostly good. Yeah. You know, I think the only really bad Kirk movie was Star Trek 3. All right, I know 5 sucks, but I think 5 is, like, creative suck, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, which is the one where they kill God?
5.
Oh, okay. I kind of like that one, actually.
Same, but like I know it's bad, but it's like they're taking chances, you know.
Is that also the one where he tries to climb the mountain at the beginning, and the doctor's like, "Damn it, Jim, you're too old to be doing this. What's wrong with you? Why are you climbing this mountain? Because it's there."
Yes, I've used that line before, because it's there.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good question about if the Army of Tennessee would have done better. And I got to be honest, like, maybe if Albert Sidney Johnston had lived, the Army fought hard in other battles, of course. Chickamauga and Stones River exceeded Shiloh in carnage. But at Shiloh, you have regiments in the Army that are making... I mean, you have some regiments that make 6 assaults alone on April 6th. Very few armies in the Civil War threw themselves into a battle as hard as the Confederates did at Shiloh. And some of that has to be Johnston in his presence. So who knows? Maybe Johnston could have cultivated and inspired these men to something more than just bickering with each other. And once again, it doesn't help that there are a number of the Army of Tennessee has more political generals, and while some political generals could do very well, I would say generally the Union was hit and miss with political generals. The Confederates was either mediocre or miss. There weren't too many hits. You
Well,
know,
our next
but
gentleman is one of the pros, Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard, someone about whom you know a great deal. You've actually written a full-length biography of him.
I have. Well, I mean, it's not like T. Harry Williams full length, but they're editing it right now. I actually just today submitted the last chapter, so it should come out later this year. Fun fact: I found out about him randomly. I was doing some Shiloh research, and I found documents about his family. Here's a fun fact: his family traces back to a Welsh family that resisted Edward I, had to flee Wales, and took up a position in the court of King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. And that's how they get the French connection, because they marry into, get this, the Lafayette family, the same one that gave us
The Marquis?
Washington's general. Yeah.
Huh.
So they married into the Lafayette family and eventually took up the name Toutant, which eventually married the Beauregards, and that's how it works out. So yeah, this is a man from Welsh, French, Italian aristocracy.
That's
Prominent
fascinating.
aristocracy too. So if any general on this list had claim to European aristocracy, it was definitely Beauregard, and boy did he know it. But anyway, Beauregard, of course, commanded armies on a few occasions, most notable for battles like not Fort Sumter's not a battle, but Fort Sumter, and of course, Battle of Bull Run. He did command a corps under Joseph E. Johnston for a period of time, but never saw battle. So why is he on this list? Because he will command a corps under Lee in 1864 from the Battle of Petersburg to Globe Tavern. He essentially acts as Lee's second in command. Now, Lee held Beauregard in high regard, always wrote well of him, often recommended him for command of the Army of Tennessee, which Davis always turned him down. In fact, I think at a certain point, Davis had to have been like, I'm tired of this. And then at some point, Lee stopped recommending him because I think he knew it wasn't going to work anyway. But for a while, he was always recommending him for Army command. Now, how did Beauregard do as a corps commander? Well, Petersburg, he was on his own for most of the battle, but then Lee arrives, holds the line. Wasn't too hard, though, at that point. He was given responsibility for launching an attack on Grant's lines that failed. That said, when Lee had to go north of the James River to deal with a Grant offensive, Beauregard was the commander of Petersburg, so he had to oversee the Battle of Globe Tavern. Globe Tavern's a weird battle. It's one of those battles where the side that takes much heavier casualties wins anyway, although they're on the defensive. Beauregard launched 3 attacks. The first 2 were very successful, did a lot of damage to the Union forces. The third attack was made, and both Beauregard and Lee decided to cultivate their forces, to build them up. So by the time they attacked, the Union forces were well positioned and entrenched, and the attack was a bloody disaster and failure. So overall, how did Beauregard perform as a corps commander under Lee? Well, I would say mostly fine, but it was a position he didn't want to be in. And while he wasn't what I would call a difficult subordinate, he wasn't what I would say a willing subordinate, if you will, or one who was glad to be there. He was looking to get some kind of command elsewhere. In fact, he was petitioning Lee to send him to the Shenandoah Valley, so he would be over early, if you will. I would say that Beauregard did well, but ultimately Globe Tavern's a defeat. His attack on Grant's lines, while not a disaster, was also a defeat, and much of that is Beauregard's fault for conceiving too complex of a battle plan. But at the same time, he serves as Lee's second in command. Globe Tavern is a battle the Union, even though they won, they took heavy losses. I guess I'd go with the C.
So that means that I guess before Longstreet came back from his wound, had Lee been incapacitated, then Beauregard would have become the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia.
Beauregard actually almost did become commander of the army because Lee at one time contemplated going to the valley to command himself and leaving Beauregard in charge. And what it looks like is the only reason he didn't do that was he perceived that Davis would never let him. That Davis would be like, "What the hell? You're leaving Beauregard in command?" And also, Beauregard, by the way, had handled a corps level command, if you will, at Drury's Bluff and Petersburg, and done very well. So, but those were kind of independent commands too. Actually, I'm going to boost him to a B.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess his best work was probably before he linked up with Lee, though, when he was fighting Benjamin Butler.
Yeah, like when he wins those battles of Drury's Bluff, Warebottom Church, and Petersburg. Yeah, it's superb work. Under Lee, he's solid, but the two battles he's involved in are both defeats. Although one of those I would squarely blame on him. The other one I would say is more of a situation of the Confederates just don't have enough men to really pull it off. The bigger story is how much casualties they're able to inflict in the meantime. So yeah, I'd love to give him an A because I like him so much, but I'll go with the B.
Okay. Next up is John Bell Hood, a figure who has never at any time been the subject of controversy.
Never at all, never at all. Although remember, he had 11 children, including 3 sets of twins. Okay?
Yeah, so I guess, didn't you say that's why he is usually favorably portrayed at the local museum in your area? Because he got so many descendants running around?
No. That's doing General Blanchard. He has like 15 descendants. Well,
okay.
He's got like 80 something. He's got 80 or 90 descendants. I've been told Hood right now has 75 direct descendants. Pretty impressive.
All the body parts that were crippled during the war, we know of one that was not.
Yeah, let's just say about Hood's boys are swimming. That's all we can say, right?
Yeah. Was it with one wife, or how many wives did he go through?
One wife.
Well, so I guess she was also very fertile then.
Yeah, just the both of them, right? So Hood, just rating him based on Corps Command, is when he's under Joseph E. Johnston. Johnston, by the way, is excited to have Hood with him. He's like, "Oh my God, thank you for saying Hood," because Hood has a sterling combat reputation. Johnston himself already had a good relationship with Hood dating back to Johnston's service in Virginia. And Hood essentially becomes Johnston's unofficial advisor in the Atlanta campaign, which is a problem since Hood is kind of reporting to Davis privately. Now, the degree to which Hood is angling for Johnston's job is debated. I'm of the opinion that he was angling for it, but he wasn't angling as hard as some historians say. Like he was bad-mouthing him because he genuinely thought Johnston was making mistakes, and he maybe kind of hoped he would get Army command. But it should also be kept in mind that when he was given Army command, his first reaction was, "Can we wait on this?" Because the Battle of Peachtree Creek was about to happen. At any rate, Hood is Corps commander. Not so great, really. What to say? I mean, he's supposed to attack at Cassville and doesn't because he sees a column of Union cavalry coming down and assumes it must be a major Union attack force, which is not. That's not a horrible thing. He based on the intelligence that he had. But beyond that, God, what can you really say? I mean, Hood's engaged in the Atlanta campaign. I mean, he holds his line, but that's his big thing. It's Kolb's Farm and Kennesaw Mountains, the big problem with him. See, at Kolb's Farm, he makes essentially an unauthorized attack, and his men get mauled. And because of that, he's not able to hold the left flank. So even though the Union attacks at Kennesaw Mountain fail, and it is a Confederate victory, It's not a victory that boosts morale. Sherman's able to get around anyway because he's able to turn Hood's left flank. So Hood, as a corps commander, showed no special abilities. He didn't seem to have. He had poor staff work, for sure. Once again, corps was beyond. I think was beyond his abilities, and I guess that's a problem because when he becomes army commander, it's like Davis promoted a man who was essentially a mediocre corps commander, right?
Yeah.
Well, mediocre at best. I give him an E.
So, do you think Hood was better as a corps commander or as an army commander?
I'd actually say army. And I know that's controversial considering some of the defeats he got, but he honestly showed more dash and creativity. And by the time he's made army commander, the Confederates are in a bad spot. I mean, Sherman's at the gates of Atlanta, and his army, unlike Grant and Meade's, is in good shape. So Hood's got a tough assignment ahead of him. And he did show some abilities in operational maneuver. That being said, I'm only saying compared to Corps Command. Once again, I think he's a pretty poor Army commander overall, in large part because he's bad at organization and staff work. His staff work might be the worst of any of these Confederate Army commanders that I've read about.
All right.
I mean, yeah, there's just certain normal things you should be able to do, and he can't do them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he was promoted pretty rapidly. What was there only about, a 3 or so month separation between becoming a corps commander and army commander? Or something along those lines?
I mean, honestly, what could Davis have done? He could have sent Beauregard in. He wasn't going to do that because he hated him. He could have put Hardee in command. And Hardee was one of Davis's favorites. But Davis was put off by the fact that Hardee had turned down command of the Army of Tennessee twice. I think Davis was like, okay, well, obviously this guy's not stepping up to the plate, so I'm not turning to him. Although Lee's recommendation was to keep Johnston at Atlanta, but Lee was like, if you're going to remove him, replace him with Hardee. That was Lee's advice. Lee advised against putting Hood in command.
So I guess when it came to these personnel decisions, did Lee ever make a call that was completely wrong, or?
I'm sure there's got to be one, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. I guess Ewell in Corps Command would be the big one. Because the indication is that Lee put a lot of faith in Ewell. I mean, for one thing, he essentially, when the Gettysburg campaign starts, it's Ewell who is given the latitude. It's Ewell who leads the advance into Pennsylvania. So Ewell will probably be one of the few personnel errors that he makes.
Our next commander is a cousin of A.P. Hill, Daniel Harvey Hill.
Oh, they were cousins?
I'm pretty sure they were, yeah.
That's interesting. They were not very much alike, except for the fact they were both excellent division commanders. But Hill was known for being caustic, bitter, but like A.P. Hill, extremely brave. So D.H. Hill got an excellent reputation as a division commander, particularly at South Mountain and Antietam. He didn't like Lee much, though. There was some tension there. So he gets transferred out. He gets sent to North Carolina for a period of time. Jefferson Davis at this point likes D.H. Hill. He's like, this guy's a great combat commander, and the Army of Tennessee could really use a hard-hitting commander. So D.H. Hill is sent to be a corps commander, and also Bragg and Hill, they weren't friends, but they had friendly pre-war relations. Very soon, Hill and Bragg are not getting along, and Hill perceived that Bragg was a beaten man who shouldn't be in Army command, so Hill has no faith in him. So Hill is ordered to attack an isolated division on the eve of Chickamauga, and doesn't do it. And that's pretty bad. They probably could have mauled that Union division pretty well. I think it was at Crawfish Springs or something like that. But anyway, so attack doesn't go through. Hill leads his corps at Chickamauga. He does better than most, but nothing too spectacular. He then leads the charge to remove Bragg, which in turn means that Hill gets removed. By this time, Davis is upset with D.H. Hill, and the two of them feud. And by the way, this feud is extremely stupid and petty. Can't emphasize that enough, man. It's fucking dumb. All right. Essentially, um, Davis won't give Hill any kind of orders or position, and Hill won't ask for one either, because both of them see that if they do it, then it's somehow they're demeaning themselves. So literally, D.H. Hill goes unused due to both his and Davis's pettiness. I mean, it's very childish. At any rate, I don't know. I think Hill might have been a good Corps commander, but he needed a general he believed in. And D.H. Hill had that same problem that he believed in very few people. We're talking one of the most caustic, critical men, north or south, to become a general. That's a hard one to rate, man. That's a hard one to rate. I know. You got any thoughts?
Not really. I don't really know that much about D.H. Hill other than I think I read somewhere that somebody said that his personality was vinegar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He is. This is the personification of vinegar. This is vinegar with arms, legs, and a brain. All right. He was into mathematics. You know about his mathematics textbook? Where you had to compute how fast two cowardly Yankees were running.
No, I've never heard of that.
It wasn't based on the Civil War, though. He wrote it before the Civil War. So it was for the Mexican-American War. Yeah, so he did a math textbook full of insults leveled at Northerners. It's either a D or an E. I got to go with an E. I don't think he's temperamentally was made for Corps command. He's too caustic.
All right. Next up is William J. Hardee.
Yeah, the old reliable, as he was known as. Hardee was one of Davis's favorites. He essentially copied a French book of tactics almost word for word, but he attributed it to himself, so it became known as Hardee's Tactics. He was very genial, fairly charismatic. Men liked him. He was good at training and organization, and was very quickly seen in the West as being like their best Corps commander. I think some of that's because he's not dysfunctional and he knows what he's doing. He knows the basics of his job. But how does he do as a Corps commander? Well, Shiloh, it's pretty iffy. On the one hand, he leads an attack on the second day that helps stabilize the line. But at the same time, he also launches some unsupported attacks on the first day. He kind of loses a bit of control. Perryville, he doesn't attack right away when told to. Stones River, he does turn the right flank and keeps the attacks going. Stones River is probably Hardee's best overall performance. He does pretty poor during Tullahoma. He's not at Chickamauga. He's at Chattanooga, where his men do hold the line better than most, and he kind of oversees the rear guard until Cleburne does. When Johnston first gets there, he at first relies on Hardee, but gradually he doesn't. Hardee did not hold Johnston in high regard. At the Atlanta campaign, Hardee did not attack at Peachtree Creek when he was supposed to, according to Hood's orders. His flank march and attack at the actual Battle of Atlanta, a few things should be kept in mind about that. He had to move rapidly all the way over and then strike. Very difficult to pull off. Essentially, Hood was trying to replicate Chancellorsville in many ways. Hardee, though, wasn't quite as quick on the draw, and the Union opposition is much better than the Union opposition at Chancellorsville. So it doesn't work out. Yeah, I'm not really too impressed with Hardee. He kind of owed his position to his reputation, connections to Davis, and his abilities at organization and drill at a time when the Army really needed that. Um, yeah, didn't really show too many signs of great ability or skill. I'd almost give him an E, but I'll stick with a D just because he has his moments and he's not like a complete dunderhead.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Like, I guess the traditional or standard view is that he was the rock of the Army of Tennessee, but I know you've always said that he's overrated at best.
The Army of Tennessee had some exceptional brigade commanders and some good division commanders, but yeah, they never really rocked it on the Army or Corps level. But some of these men could have. I think with a guy like Johnston or Beauregard, they could have cultivated the talents that some of these men had, but it just didn't occur. So I got to rate them on what they did, not their potential.
Right.
It's a
Well,
very E heavy list, man. We got a lot of bottom feeders here.
to be fair, though, the Army of Tennessee did lose a shit ton of battles. I guess other than Chickamauga, weren't they over?
They did win a variety of defensive battles in the Atlanta campaign, like New Hope Church, Pickett's Mill, and Kennesaw Mountain. And of course, the Army of Tennessee's cavalry had a fearsome reputation. I could even argue a better, probably actually like more fearsome than Jeb Stuart in Virginia. So you are talking about an army with bad artillery, infantry's kind of you know, better at the regiment and brigade command, worse as you go up. Cavalry though is I'd actually say from spring of 1862 to spring of 1863, that's the best cavalry of the Civil War until you get like Sheridan's men at the end of the war. I mean, excellent raiders, and they actually win field battles against like infantry, like Thompson Station and Hartsville. So
Huh.
pretty impressive. So yeah, the Army of Tennessee was an army that was surviving on its cavalry for a period of time.
It would have made Murat proud.
Would have made Murat would have applauded the exploits of Forrest, Morgan, and maybe Wheeler, right?
Yeah. And last but not least, another Army of Northern Virginia Corps commander, James Longstreet.
Yes, my old warhorse, Old Pete, as he was also known. Yeah, he's really gone a reevaluation. Some of that, of course, is tied to politics. Since after the war, of all the Confederates, he's the most aggressive in support of the Republican Party, at least amongst high-ranking Confederates. But as a corps commander, he's going to be he's going to he was a favorite of Johnston. He did very poorly at 7 Days, but he did pretty well. I'm sorry, very poorly at Seven Pines. He does well in the 7 Days. Of course, he does exceptionally well at Second Manassas, Antietam, Fredericksburg. Then you get to Gettysburg. There was controversy about Longstreet for a time that he did not handle Gettysburg well. Consensus now is actually no, he did. Um, Longstreet was not just a defensive commander by any means. He could launch a powerful attack for sure. By the time we get into Gettysburg, by the way, Longstreet has an excellent corps staff. That said, he did pretty well at Chickamauga, but after that, not well at all. He didn't handle his men well. But he's openly arguing with his army commander. His handling of the Knoxville campaign is poor. But then you get to the Wilderness, and what do you know? He launches an attack that rolls up the Union left flank. I think Hancock said, "You rolled me up like a wet rug," is what he said.
Damn.
Yeah. Uh, One thing about Longstreet to keep in mind too is the why did Lee stay near him so much? Because the Douglas Southall Freeman argument was that Lee, when he was on the march, stayed near Longstreet because he trusted Jackson in independent command, but felt Longstreet needed guidance. And maybe, but it should also be kept in mind that Longstreet was usually one of them was definitely along with Jackson, but especially Longstreet was a man Lee went to for military advice. So I think Lee wanted to be near his advisor, if you will. In addition, Lee had a friendship with Longstreet. He liked him. They liked each other. Longstreet named one of his kids after Lee. So I think Lee also just liked his company. You know, uh, so there's a lot of factors there. But there's a question. There's a feeling with some people that if Longstreet had been under command of somebody else, he may not have done so well. But Lee was able to perfectly utilize his talents. And while sure Jackson served Lee well and did some excellent stuff, Longstreet is truly Lee's right hand man and earned the title "My Old Warhorse." So I would say an A. Nah, fuck it, give him an S. He's the best corps commander of the army. He's the best corps commander of the Civil War. What the fuck am I saying?
Yeah, so another thing, speaking of Lee liking to be near Longstreet, I read in one book, it's actually a novel, but one of the point of view characters was not a big Longstreet fan and said that he reminded him of a bear. Because he was a
Yeah,
very
definitely.
large man, could be intimidating when he wanted to be, and apparently would stare at you in a way that would make you feel like you're about to get your ass kicked if he was unhappy. So,
Yes,
do you
that
think
all
maybe
sounds like
Lee wanted
Long.
him around partly as a bodyguard to some extent, or at least to keep people in check? Since, I mean, there were a lot of fucking egos that we've talked about on this list.
Yeah, you got a point there. Longstreet was not a man to back down from that stuff. I mean, very few of these men are. I mean, one of my favorite Cheatham stories is um, Forrest almost shot Cheatham at one point in an argument, and Cheatham just said, "Go ahead, I fear no man." The Army of Tennessee. But yeah, no, Longstreet is definitely one of the most intimidating men on this list.
And also, it's
Big
interesting,
bear.
speaking of A.P. Hill, because Longstreet and Jackson had very different personalities. Longstreet, from what I understand, had a sense of humor, although he was morose for a lot of the war. Jackson, very bizarre, eccentric, sucking on lemons, quoting the Bible. Longstreet, much more literal minded, advocating for certain strategies and defenses. So it would seem like if you didn't get along with one, you had at least a shot of finding a way to get along with the other. Because between the two of them, they had enough divergent personality traits that you could find something to latch onto and work with. So, but
Yeah.
otherwise, though, from what I understand, A.P. Hill got along with everybody else, just not those two people, which is weird.
Well, I mean, AP Hill also might have been one of those kind of guys who doesn't like his superiors. I mean, Rosecrans had that problem.
Well, apparently Hill got along well with Lee, and also all his subordinates liked him.
Yeah, I mean, once again, that kind of sounds like Rosecrans.
Yeah,
You know, McClellan, similar thing. McClellan didn't get along with his superiors. Subordinates mostly liked him, especially the division and brigade level. Naturally, that's like that. Guys like Bernard Law Hill. I mean Bernard Law Montgomery in World War II. He cultivated. His the subordinates were loyal to him, and he cultivated them. But he was hell to his superiors. Um, Nathan Bedford Forrest is another example as well. Um, but yeah, no, Longstreet. Yeah, I gotta go with an S, man. Very few commanders, very few corps commanders did as consistently well as he did. So yeah, I give him an S. He's probably the best corps commander in either army.
yeah. I guess would you think? Because I know he also gave Lee strategic advice. How important do you think that is to the makeup of a corps commander to be able to offer broader strategic advice?
Very important. Who are you relying on as kind of your unofficial advisor? Almost every army commander has it. I mean, if for Sherman in the Atlanta campaign, it was Thomas. For Grant against Vicksburg, it was Sherman. Lee would, of course, consult both Longstreet and Jackson, but I felt like Longstreet was more of the strategic advisor than Jackson. Once again, Lee was usually closer to Longstreet's headquarters, so they talked a lot more, you know.
Yeah, and I imagine that some of these guys would not be very good strategy advisors. I get the impression that, say, Cheatham, his advice would be, pass me another bottle of whiskey.
and let's go charge.
Yeah.
Beauregard as a strategist is perplexing. A mix of it, like he's simultaneously like very shrewd and also very dumb. The dumb part is that he seemed to make plans where he imagined his enemy would do what he thought they would do, and he didn't always take into consideration logistics. He very much was obsessed with formal military principles. At the same time, his overall idea was right. The armies need to concentrate and take the offensive, and to concentrate, they would have to sacrifice some territory. And for Davis, that just was not something he was willing to do for understandable reasons. And, Beauregard and Davis didn't get along for a number of reasons, but one of them definitely was they had different conceptions of Confederate strategy. Beauregard was more than willing to abandon some territory to mass forces and try to win a decisive battle. Something that Davis was not quite so willing to do.
Yeah. So just to recapitulate the list that we have here, James Longstreet, S tier, Jubal Early, A tier. In the B tier, we have Stonewall Jackson, Richard Anderson, and P.G.T. Beauregard. C tier is A.P. Hill, S.D. Lee, and Braxton Bragg. D tier is Richard Ewell, Magruder, and William Hardee. The E tier, which is the most crowded, features A.P. Stewart, Leonidas K. Polk, Simon Bolivar Buckner, John Bell Hood, Daniel Harvey Hill, and in the F tier, John C. Breckinridge and Benjamin F. Cheatham. So if you had to guess when this video is eventually, when it is published and people watch it afterwards and offer their critiques, which rankings do you think we will get the most flack for?
Before I answer that, I want to say real quick, I would have given Polk an F if not for Resaca. Not only is it his finest hour, it's like, it saves the army. Very few of these men on this list can ever say, what I did saved an entire army. Polk can say that, so that's why he gets an A. Otherwise, he'd be an F.
I saved the army after I spent a long time not delivering.
A long time not delivering, but man, this one time, boy, was I there when you needed me.
The one time I came through was the time that literally saved us.
Yeah. I think some people would probably say that Early and Beauregard are more highly rated than they should be, and Jackson should be higher than he is.
I agree.
Also, Bragg being a C, Bragg's Shiloh reputation is pretty low. As I said, I think that's a bit undeserved, but to be fair, the thing that people really zero in on Shiloh is the stuff he did with Gibson's brigade, which was deplorable. Another way to put it.
And I wonder if there will be any Hardee fanboys, or at least fanboys of the Thick Burger, who will come in and say Hardee should be at least an A.
They're like, I like Hardee's, man. I'm a Hardee's, man. That was a thing. That's right. We were talking about that thing where it's like, we were like, yeah, people associate themselves with like products. And Michael was like, really? And then you just went, yeah, I'm a Hardee's, man.
Well, I was thinking of when I lived in Kansas as a kid. There were a number of people we'd pass on the road who would have those little fucking Hardee stars on their antennas.
Holy hell!
They would hand those out with, I don't know if it was Happy Meals or meals or how you got one of those. I think we got a couple. We never put them on the car though. But there were people we'd pass that had them, and there's only one Hardee's in town, and it wasn't even a good one. And so I just thought that was weird that somebody would do that to their car over a roast beef and hamburger restaurant. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it's funny you mentioned being a roast beef and hamburger restaurant. They were mostly fried chicken in the 90s, weren't they?
Well, maybe. I always associated them with roast beef until they quit carrying that, because that was usually what I ordered when we went there. But
yeah, I think they were more a fried chicken place than nice, because we used to like they didn't have them in New Orleans. We'd doing a road trip. We get fried chicken there. We like the fried chicken. Which I know you might be saying to everybody is like, how do you mess up fried chicken? I'm like, go to Church's. Then you'll see how you mess up fried chicken. Okay?
One thing the pandemic took out around here was the only churches I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, I mean, I really can't see how churches is ever going to survive. I mean, there was a decent number of them pre Hurricane Katrina around here, but now I barely know of any churches in town.
You
I mean,
know,
I know there's one or two.
there's only been two restaurants that are sort of either on a path I drive or a place I go to on a regular basis that have gone under permanently, or I think permanently. I don't know for sure. One of them is churches, which I've never been to because I mean, I guess I've never talked about this on air, but I fucking can't tolerate greasy food. I mean, it literally makes me sick if it's like
Yeah.
super greasy. The second thing is this place that's an Asian fusion where they
Hmm.
do all kinds of different Asian food, and the one near us did all of them well. Now some of them not brilliantly, but all of them they did well. So it's a place you could go to and get pretty much any Asian dish, and you got a decent proportion and some quality. And that was it was sort of my go-to place when we'd go out to eat, and that went under. So that really hurt. But anyway,
Oh.
yeah, I'm shedding no tears for churches.
Well, the only thing that's really great at churches is they do have fried okra, which is I love fried okra.
Yeah.
But also they have great biscuit. I will give churches this. They probably have the best of the like fried chicken and you get a biscuit thing. They got the best biscuit probably. But the actual chicken itself is terrible. Although who used to be who used to be their spokeswoman was Ann Esther from Sanford and Son.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, she was their spokesperson in the '90s.
Damn. Well, I mean, you know what I always say, though? All fast food mascots pale in comparison with the greatness of Mr. Delicious.
I agree. When is Rax going to make its big comeback? Do you think?
Maybe post pandemic. Hello, I'm Mr. Delicious. I had a rather vicious case of COVID, but I've recovered my taste buds, and my taste buds tell me there's only one place for Mr. Delicious, and that's Rax. We're starting right now. You can get a really underdeveloped salad bar starting at $6.99.
Man, God, it's like I like one person's about Mr. D though. They're like, look, this is like a shit post before a shit post.
Yeah, it basically
Yeah.
is. I mean, there's also this one ad where he's talking about the speed bumps, and he's complaining because he just had a vasectomy and the speed bumps hurt.
God, it's so good.
I know, it's like,
God,
who
Mr.
thought of this? This is genius. I mean, I don't know, because the thing is, somebody had to approve this too. It's not just some jaded writer who threw this together, but then he convinced his boss this is the direction to take.
And they went, yes,
And
yes,
they
it
said
is.
yes,
Now,
and then threw probably tens of thousands of dollars at it to make sure it got on the radio. So, whoever was the writer on this and had to sell this to management, my hat goes off to you. Brilliant work.
Mm.
All right. Well, let's see. We got to figure out who won the giveaway for this evening. It looks like it is a two-way tie between Speedy Sphincter and Diogenes. So I guess the question becomes, how do we break the tie? Or wait, is that right? It is right. Both of them are at 25. No. Wait, I gotta redo the math. That's wrong. Diogenes wins. He is at 25. Speedy is only at 15. Oscar Palacios is at 20. So,
well, I tell you what, Diogenes, I'll get you 2 books. I'm going to send you 2. I've got the list of what your subjects are of interest. So I'll grab you 2. Okay.
all right, yeah. So you get 2 to Diogenes. I'll get 1 to C.S. Ventura, who was the other winner of last week. This week was pretty hectic for me. I didn't get around to doing a lot of things, so I'll make sure to do that this week.
This month's going to be hectic. This is a lot of work, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so
it's
anyway,
good.
Diogenes, don't worry, you did win.
You did win. It may take a while, even longer than usual, but we'll get you some books, okay? I'm gonna go grab them after this and decide what to get you.
Yep.
Mm.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. At some point in the near to intermediate future, I guess we'll come back and do the Union Corps commanders. We'll have to do those in two parts, though, because they had about double the number as the Confederates.
I didn't just say triple. I think I have the three list, don't I?
There's only two lists.
Only two? Okay. Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of guys, man. It's a lot to go through. But I know next week, of course, is going to be assassinations, where I'll be, at least on my end, I'll be talking about Buckingham and the great James A. Garfield.
And I will be talking about Philip II of Macedon, Julius Caesar, and a third person who will remain a mystery for now.
Oh, well, exciting, huh?
Yeah, it's. I'll give you a hint though. It's someone about whom we've learned more details in regard to their assassination recently.
Excellent. I know we also are going to do the do some retrospectives on presidents, especially ones in the last 40, 50 years. And I told you at one point, just for the hell of it, I'd like to do an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie tier list.
Yeah, Total Recall.
What is that, S tier for you?
I would say so. It's a
I'd
good
say
movie.
fuck yeah, man. But hell, on that note, I got to do some. Actually, to get ready for that one, I gotta pump up some Arnold movies. Okay, well, it's time to watch a bunch of Schwarzenegger films. I mean, I've seen most of them, but need to watch all the other ones that are on my list to see.
Yeah, or to quote Arnold in regard to lifting weights, it's like having many orgasms.
I think his line is "A pumping iron is like coming inside of a beautiful woman, so I'm coming all the time."
Yeah, remember the Arnold statue here in Columbus where it was at him at his peak where he had what looked like muscles coming out of muscles that were coming out of other muscles?
Yeah, they still have that, don't they?
Yep, that's right downtown. It's sort of in the middle of downtown near a lot of the major convention centers and hotels.
I remember I specifically got my picture taken next to that thing. It's not even that good of a statue. I'm just glad there's an Arnold statue somewhere in this country.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have the Arnold Classic here every year, so.
Yeah, what is that exactly?
It is a bodybuilding competition and also just a general sort of convention where people get together and talk about fitness and weightlifting and things like that. One of my friends who was here is really into fitness and he used to go to it. Actually, I had a couple friends who went at least once, but only had one friend who went every single time.
Okay.
So, I mean, it
Yeah.
did draw in a pretty good crowd, actually. Part of our
Okay.
tourism industry. And of course, with the pandemic being what it is, not so much this year or in 2020.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna look up the. I'm gonna see what Schwarzenegger movies I'm missing out on and make sure I've seen them so that whenever we do that, I'm ready to go. You know.
Have you seen Terminator 3 and I think Genesis?
I have never seen Terminator Genesis, and I have not seen the Terminator Dark Fate, and I don't wanna. So I'm not gonna do those. Okay, I have no interest.
I have
They
seen
look.
Genesis. It is very forgettable, though. I couldn't tell you what the hell happened.
I've been told it's a confusing mess of a movie. I mean, ultimately, like when Terminator 3 came out, my reaction was why? The second movie seemed to have, you ended on a high point, and then I was like, oh, that's right. The reason why is we're going to make some money, right? So then I watched Terminator 3 randomly, like a few years after it comes out. And I was like, it's all right. It's not bad. It's got moments. It's got some good action sequences. I've heard though that while Terminator 3 was average, everything after it has just been varying degrees of god awful. Am I wrong?
That would be my impression, too. I think when I
Yeah.
was watching Genesis, though, it was one of those movies I had on while I was working on some other stuff, so I wasn't paying super close attention. So if there were any brilliant scenes, I missed them. But I'm pretty sure there weren't any, so.
I gotta wonder about one thing though. Schwarzenegger did direct a movie. You know that?
No.
Yeah.
Oh God, that
Yes,
sounds
he
a little
directed a movie. It
worrisome.
was called like it was called Christmas in Connecticut.
Damn.
Yeah, I know. What the hell, huh?
Well, I guess that's all we got for now.
I think that is all we have for the evening.
So, I'm Thersites the Historian. He's Sean. We will see you next week on the Ides of March. Beware because we're doing some assassinations. And by doing, I mean talking about. We're not performing any assassinations. So don't take that out of context. Good night. All right.